Okay, commissioners, if you're in the room, could you take your seats so we can get started? We do have quorum. Okay, welcome everyone to the TTC Board Committee Meeting number 2027. Any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? I see none. We can move on to approve the minutes of the previous meeting that were held on June 12th, moved by Commissioner Lalonde. All those in favor? That carries. We'll go through an agenda run through. I will hold item number 1 and 2. Item number 3, TYSSC claim settlement update. We have had a late deputation request on this item and 6 others from Emily Daig. Can I recommend that there are a couple items where we already have deputations on, and maybe we can add her to those items that she's requested to speak on? Does that sound reasonable? So on item number 3, does someone want to move the staff recommendations actions taken in camera? Moved by Commissioner Campbell. All those in favor? No opposed. That carries. Item number 4 is the new TTC bus storage and maintenance facility. Staff actions taken in camera and staff recommendations moved by Commissioner Campbell. All those in favor? No opposed. That carries. Item number 5, which is the ongoing TTC benefits fraud investigation. The actions taken in camera moved by Commissioner Crisanti. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 6 is the 2018 mid-year workforce increase. Hold for public questions. Item number 7, Auditor General's report, review of employee expenses and reward and recognition programs. That was dealt with at, you're moving that? Or holding, sorry. Moved by Commissioner Byers. All those in favor? So those recommendations are adopted. Number 8 is the internal audit quarterly update for second quarter 2018. For information, I'll move receipt. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 9, financial update. We have a deputant on this item, so we'll hold that in my name. Item number 10, Pioneer Village Station art installation. Moved definitively by, I'll say, Fragadakis got there first. All those in favor? No opposed. That carries. Item number 11, Hillcrest Complex property study. I don't see any deputations. Staff recommendations moved by Commissioner Byers. All those in favor? Carries. Item number 12, Scarborough Subway Extension Procurement Amendment Authorization. Question held by Commissioner Byers. Number 13 is the Yonge Subway Extension Station Design. Question on that? Item number 4, yes, we're holding number 9. We're holding number 14 because there's a deputation, and number 15. Item number 16 is investigation into incident dated February 18th, 2018 involving transit fare inspectors. Moved by Commissioner De Laurentiis. All those in favor? That carries. Number 17 is a 2017 annual public report, Transit Enforcement Unit complaints. For information, moved by Commissioner Lalonde. All those in favor? That carries. Number 18, we have deputants, and I think a request to have someone added to, so we'll deal with that in a moment. Item number 19 is the Government Management Committee item that was forwarded to us, which is the transfer of TTC lands at 546 Lansdowne Avenue to the City of Toronto. Moved by Commissioner Fragadakis. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 20, the Ridership Growth Strategy status update. Question from Commissioner Byers. Item number 21, I believe there's questions from Commissioner Min Wong and maybe others. Yep. Item number 22, appointment of Chief Executive Officer. I'll hold that. Item number 23 is a notice of motion from Commissioner Heisey about Metrolinx and TTC boards. We'll hold that in his name. Item number 24 is Commissioner Heisey's motion about bike share and ferries. We'll hold that in his name. Item number 25, the TTC from Transit to Integrated Mobility. Motion Commissioner Cole, Chair Cole, I'll hold that. And Commissioner Fragedakis, item number 26. You'll move it? Is everyone good with that? 26 is requesting. Okay, we'll hold that for now. Okay, so we have items 1, 2, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. There's 2 requests for just ordering of the agenda. I am going to move item number 22 to our first item to deal with. And there's been a request on the new streetcar program, resubmission of RFI results for 60 additional streetcars, for that to be moved up. Why don't we move that after item number, is that good enough? After number 13, the 2 subway items where Commissioner Byers has questions? That would be the 5th item? Okay. So we'll do that in there, and we'll do item number 22 first. So we're good with that? So we are on item number 22. I'm not sure if anyone wants to speak to it. I certainly want to move. I'll start with moving a motion that adopts the actions taken in camera. Does anyone want to speak, or do we just need a recorded vote? Okay, I'll ask for a recorded vote on moving those recommendations. All those in favor? Noted that that vote is unanimous. So, like the in-camera portion was also unanimous on the recommendation that this board is taking that Rick Leary be our new CEO. So 15 seconds in, we're going to hand him the CEO's report. And Bombardier is here today, too, just to... we're going to do that after we sign a couple things.
He's got that random drug test he still has to pass.
He actually does.
And the psychological assessment. There's such a long list.
He does. So with that, we're done item number 22. We'll move to item number 1, which is the CEO's report, and ask our CEO to introduce that for us.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioners, as you know, this is our last scheduled meeting before the recess of the October 22nd municipal election. The term of the office for the current board expires on November 30. Board meetings will resume again on December 12. Today, I want to talk a little bit about our current issues and a bit about what we've accomplished together over the last 4 years. There'll be quite a few slides that'll be coming up as I continue to talk. First, I'll touch on hot cars. You know, they say no news is good news, and that's certainly true in the case of Line 2 and the recent heat wave. And as you can see in the slide, the photo up on the board, 2015 and especially 2016 were our biggest problem years for hot cars. Customers who found themselves on one of the T1 cars where the air conditioning wasn't working were, I'd say, very understandably upset. In the fall of 2016, we began an overhaul and restore systems and controls, and it worked. We had a 70% reduction over the previous year and have had a further 40% reduction so far this summer. We're continuing with our ongoing preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance practices, including inspection and cleaning. The next photograph, we're going to talk a little Presto. Presto implementation continues. Fare gate construction has ended, and the fare gates are available at all but 2 entrances. The Commerce Court entrance at King Station and the main entrance at Yorkdale Station will have new fare gates installed as part of the easy access work schedule at those stations for next year. Presto fare vending machines have been installed at 1 entrance at every station, making it even easier for customers to purchase their Presto card and load it with monthly pass or money. Every station entrance will have at least one of these machines along with one self-service reload machine by this fall. Later this summer, a number of new fare options will be introduced on Presto, including a youth monthly pass, senior and youth 12-month passes, and of course, the new 2-hour time-based transfer, which will only be available to customers on the Presto card. At the end of August, we'll begin rolling out our new TTC Presto advertising campaign to promote the TTC fare options available on Presto. The campaign is called Another Reason to Presto. Campaign posters and Presto videos will be available across the system and on social media. I'll touch a little on closures. Last month, I spoke to you about weekend closures, and I told you that we would resume closures on June 24th. I'm pleased to report that these closures have in fact begun with a stated good repair closure on Line 3 that weekend, and this past weekend, Line 1 closed from St. Clair to Lawrence for crosstown construction, and Line 2 opened a bit late on Sunday morning between St. George and Broadview so the city could do the work on the Bloor Viaduct. We took advantage of doing a little extra track work at this time while that was down. We've been able to do this work because in the last few months, 84 new bus operators have been hired and graduated from our training program to help with the day-to-day operations and closures. You can see an example of an operator recruitment campaign that we ran up on the screen. I'm pleased to tell you that this Friday, after a hiatus was not of our making, we're bringing back our weekly page on the Star Metro, the commuter paper that is distributed in our stations. This paper will give us another channel to communicate with our customers and will feature news customers can use, including closure information, and will allow us to showcase the good work of our employees through a weekly employee spotlight feature. As for SAP, the implementation of SAP has been complex and difficult. It's essential for us to continue this work to replace our 35-year-old and older systems and processes. Our pension office went live with SAP in November, with the first pensioner paid in December. It has been successful and a welcome transition, and we look forward to later on this year when we'll go live with certain areas of finance, and that's including general ledger and cost center accounting, payroll and benefits, and some of our HR functions, including recruiting and onboarding personnel administration, organizational management, and employee self-service. Now, just going to take a little look back at the last few years. Since its first meeting in 2014, under the leadership of Chair Cole, this board has seen us through many milestones, including, of course, the opening of Line 1 extension to York Region, the first subway expansion in 15 years. That expansion runs on automatic train control, which when fully implemented, will greatly improve the capacity of service along Line 1. Let's just take a little look back at a number of other highlights, if we may. During this board's tenure, Chair Cole helped us welcome our 30 billionth customer in 2015 and our 31st billionth this last summer. The foresight and the funding decisions of this board and our council enabled the TTC to greatly improve service, including children under 12 ride-free, making transit accessible and affordable for families. The subway opens earlier on Sundays so that people can get to where they need to go. And we've brought more than 60 new and improved bus routes, more off-peak service, expanded our all-day, all-night bus and streetcar service as well. We introduced the city's first new streetcar route since 2000 when we introduced the 514 Cherry Street when it was launched. More recently, we've launched 2 new routes, the Mimco Go service and the Bluffers Park service. This September, we will see new express service operate on 4 routes. That's Islington, Shepherd West, Shepherd East, and Markham Road. And crowding in both peak and off-peak periods will be reduced for customers on 17 routes. Now, no discussion about service improvements would be complete without mentioning the King Street pilot study or the Wheel-Trans 10-year service transformation strategy, which is part of our overall commitment to making the TTC more accessible for all. In 2016, Chair Cole officially opened Leslie Barnes, and more recently was able to help us break ground on the McNichol Bus Garage, which we greatly need as we bring in our new buses. This board also helped the TTC develop its 5-year corporate plan. In January, you approved a plan that will help us advance to the next level in 5 critical paths: transforming for financial sustainability, enabling our employees to succeed, moving more customers more reliably, taking public transit seamless, and innovating for the long term with safety as the cornerstone of all that we do. Last year, with safety in mind, the TTC introduced random drug and alcohol testing to help ensure safety for our employees, customers, and all road users. We also spoke publicly about harassment and assault on our system and launched the Safe TTC reporting app and the accompanying award-winning This Is Where campaign. Using the app while in the subway system is possible because we now have Wi-Fi in every subway station, and Freedom Mobile customers have cell service in all stations and throughout much of our tunnels. These are just a few of the accomplishments we've achieved together. You know, I'd like to thank my colleagues on the executive as well as the Commission Services staff, Kevin, Chrisan, for their tireless work and on the issues that they provide for this board every month. And on behalf of all TTC employees, those dedicated public servants who strive to make the TTC transit system that makes Toronto proud. So with that, I want to thank you for your support. I'll end by talking a little bit about Bombardier. Finally, Benoit is from Bombardier Transportation of Canada is here to address you and answer questions. And before I do turn it over to Benoit, I want to just briefly address the welding issues that have been in the news as of last week. And I would just want to stress to you that this is not a safety issue and that we have been working with Bombardier on a repair schedule, one that will be minimal impact to our service. It is a very complex issue that we are determined to get right. Bombardier, under Benoit's leadership, has managed to meet the last number of scheduled commitments. So with that, I thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it on over Benoit.
Thank you and congratulations. O'Leary. To push.
Yeah, there you're on.
There
now.
we go ahead. Mr. Chairman, dear board members, my name is Benoit Brossois. I'm the president of Bombardier Transportation for the Americas since April 2016. I'm here today with our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. David Vandervee, who joined my team on May 2017. We appreciate the opportunity to address the board regarding the preventative welding maintenance program that we have implemented. First and foremost, we understand and share the disappointment of the mayor, the board, and the TTC riders, and we truly apologize. I wish I was here to discuss the positive benefits that our cars will have and continue to have to bring to Toronto for the next 30 years, or the fact that we have delivered on our commitment over the past 2 quarters this year. However, I'm here because Bombardier is proactively, transparently, and actually responsibly, driving and dealing with the issue whenever they arise. I will now let David Vandervee, our Chief Operating Officer, explain to you the issue.
Thank you, Benoit. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. The facts are as follows. 67 LRV cars produced up to 2017 with structural elements originating in our plant in Mexico and currently in service in Toronto need preventative welding repair, which will occur over the next 4 years so we can ensure that the expected longevity of 30 years is met for the car body structure. I want to assure everyone that this situation poses absolutely no safety issue for the TTC riders or the employees. This situation also has no impact on the production of new cars to be delivered to TTC by the end of 2019. We are working with TTC on a repair schedule that will have minimal impact on customer service while the preventative maintenance program is being performed at our Welding Center of Excellence in La Pocatière, Quebec. The TTC and Bombardier both agree on the nature and the scope of the preventative repair, and Bombardier will assume the entire cost of it. Last week, Bombardier proactively requested a meeting with Ben Spur at the Toronto Star to explain the situation in all transparency and made our subject matter expert available to answer any technical questions. We also reached out to relevant stakeholders to offer the exact same briefing. Bombardier recognize and own this issue in its entirety, and again, we apologize. All appropriate actions are being taken to resolve this issue. You may rightfully ask yourself, why did it take so long to implement such a program? I would just like to put it in context regarding the complexity of the process. There is close to 1 mile of welding for each TTC vehicle. And really, we are only talking about 1.5% of that 1 mile that is an area of concern as far as welding is concerned. We went through a deep investigation performed with a worldwide team of renowned welding engineers under the leadership of a PhD and a fellow, an expert in structural integrity. The conclusions were fully peer-reviewed by our global engineering and an independent product safety team. There was a high level of scrutiny, investigation, data collection, structural calculation, and coordination required before we could ensure that we had fully identified and understood the issue and found the right solution to fix it. The investigation showed that the causes are in fact multifactorial. First of all, the low-floor, short-angle cars to meet the TTC track-specific configuration represent a higher-than-normal welding challenge, since meeting these requirements requires more complex assemblies. Also, the use of duplex stainless steel adds to the technological challenge, but is necessary to meet the TTC's mechanical strength and corrosion resistance requirements. With the level of complexity driven by both the geometry and the material characteristics, our training plan for welders and overall process control was not sufficient to ensure 100% good quality at all times. It has since been rectified. When narrowing down the issue to 67 cars, I just want to highlight that we work with very, very conservative assumptions, always to be on the safe side of things. The root causes of this issue have been corrected. While we are still investigating, controls were put in place in the autumn of 2016, and improvements were implemented immediately. Through additional process improvements, the situation was finally rectified in June 2017. As previously mentioned, the 67 cars will be sent progressively to our Welding Center of Excellence in La Pocatière, Quebec, to undergo preventative maintenance repairs. The full program takes 19 weeks per vehicle, including 4 weeks for shipment and 3 weeks to perform the commissioning test so the vehicle can re-enter into service. We are committed to quality. The reliability of our streetcars and our rigorous maintenance program should prevent any other issues of this nature. We pride ourselves with a policy on product safety and an independent safety engineer. This safety and quality mindset, together with our professional risk management approach, distinguish Bombardier in the rail transportation industry. I would like to now turn it over to Benoit.
Thank you, David. I want to reassure you about Bombardier's commitment to you, the Torontonians, and the province of Ontario. Programs like this are complex and full of challenges. Our commitment is to deliver on our promises, but also to make it right when situations like this occur. Bombardier stands by its product, always, no compromise. To me, this commitment is more than just words. It reflects itself with concrete actions. In the last 2 years, I have worked out with a renewed leadership team to deliver on our commitments to you. This issue is not irrelevant, but it needs to be analyzed with other factors and positive trends that demonstrate our commitment to change and turn this situation around. For those who know me, status quo is not my cup of tea. When I came on board, I took the time to analyze the situation, and I launched our turnaround plan. Since then, we invested over $20 million here in Ontario to improve our delivery rate. We opened another production line in our Kingston plant that is scheduled to deliver the first cars to TTC this fall. We have also invested in our La Pocatière plant and our manufacturing plant in Germany to have 2 manufacturing sources for some critical car body structures. In addition, we invested over $6 million in our global supply chain to increase capacity and in some cases have dual sourcing. We are starting to harvest this benefit. The results are here. We doubled our delivery capacity, and we are about to double it again this year. For the second quarter in a row, Bombardier met its target. We delivered 27 cars in the first 6 months of the year, which is an increase of almost 300% over the same period last year, and 38 more deliveries are planned for 2018. We are fully committed to the overall delivery of the 204 cars by the end of 2019. This means 77 more cars will be delivered next year. Bombardier is Canadian, and we are committed to Ontario. In the industry, we have by far the largest footprint in this province. You probably know that most of our employees are actually right here in Ontario. We have 2,700 workers in Mississauga, Kingston, Thunder Bay, and Etobicoke. Among them, over 575 are dedicated to the TTC streetcar project. 60% of our 200 Canadian suppliers are based right here in Ontario, and we exceed the 25% Canadian content requirement. We have a significant impact on the economy of Ontario, and we don't want people to forget it. To conclude, I sincerely hear your frustration. Bombardier takes this situation very seriously. I personally take this situation very seriously. Issues like this one are not uncommon in the industry. It does not make our cars bad. However, let's ask ourselves how other manufacturers would have handled similar situation. Our presence here today shows that we are dealing with this issue proactively, in full transparency, and responsibly with the TTC, its riders, and the public, making sure there's no compromise on quality and safety. We are committed to the success of the TTC, success of Toronto and Ontario, and we have taken actions to demonstrate it. Thank you for your time, and we are now available to answer your questions that are related to our preventative maintenance program.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. Board members, I'm going to suggest that because this is a part of the CEO's report, that if we have questions of Bombardier, we do that now. And then if people have additional questions that in general were in this month's CEO's report, we can do an additional round for those questions and let these gentlemen go. Does that sound okay? So beginning with Commissioner Bai. Yeah, we're going to deal with this issue in item first. So Commissioner Bayer.
Thank you. And thank you for joining our meeting today. I want to ask first, again, and you think touched on it, how and when did you discover this welding defect? Because after all, these vehicles had been on the streets of Toronto for many months before and in operation. So what caused this discovery to be made?
So I would say first, we started a deep investigation not shortly after my arrival in 2016. Obviously, Bombardier has a very structured quality system, as well as a safety policy. And obviously, it forces us to accomplish certain activities that would, if a situation like this appear, it would actually raise it to the top. So in 2016 is when we identified there was a possible issue, and we started the deep dive. I could turn over maybe to David to provide a little more color on that deep dive and how we went about it.
Sure, thank you, Benoit. So, as I said, the problem really is rooted in the fact that we are talking about a very, very small portion of the welds when you look at the overall welding activity. In Q1, we sent some engineers from our La Pocatière facility in Q1 of 2016, and they went in and did a welding audit, and we saw some non-conformities. That launched an investigation. The nature of the investigation involves over 256 cut-ups of various components to be able to understand the nature of the repetition of the issue, the nature of the geometry of the imperfection, and what that means from a structural point of view. That investigation progressed into the fall, In the fall, we had a brand new management team in Mexico in 2016, where we implemented a much more rigorous process control standards that continued to evolve throughout 2017, where we optimized the welding parameters and basically did a lot of process improvements as we finalized the analysis throughout 2017, which basically brought us to having fully conforming material as of July, approximately July 2017.
Okay, thank you. So it was sparked by an audit. You must have had some questions, and I note your commitment to Ontario and Canada, and yet this work was done in Mexico, and so you can clearly understand why riders of your system here in Toronto would be frustrated with that. How can you tell us, though, that it's only 1.5% of the welds? I mean, in my youth did some welding. Thank goodness I'm not involved in your work. But how is it that we can say comfortably, oh, no, don't worry, it's only 98.5% of the welds are all good. Take it from us. I mean, how can we be confident that there aren't other errors that you have not yet discovered, as you had not yet discovered these when the vehicles were on Toronto streets?
Sure. So the answer to that is basically, and just to be precise, it's not 1.6% of the welds. It's 1.6% of the total length that is suspect. So this is not a good and a bad sort of question. There is a question that 1.5% is suspect enough that we want to go and proactively do something about it. I think it's important to note there's a high degree of conservatism that we apply. When we go and we analyze exactly what we're up against and try and paint a full portrait, we do a couple of things. We assume the absolute worst case in terms of stresses in the environment, so the forces that are on the structure. We go beyond the contract. We assume the worst case contractual stress 100% all the time. We assume that the imperfections that could be present in the welds are not only present in one location, but they expand the entire length of a particular weld, which brings another worst case scenario. We assume the worst case scenario on the material properties. We assume the worst case scenario of the stress orientation with respect to the weld. There is a high level of conservatism that is applied. So that analysis brings us basically to a situation where we say, okay, we now know with a large degree of margin a population of structures, and we understand where each vehicle, those are in those structures, so we create the envelope of vehicles that we want to go and deal with. Throughout the manufacturing of the structures, they were manufactured throughout the period where we were actually introducing improvements as we went along. We fully expect the earlier vehicles to have more rework to do than the later vehicles. In the later vehicles, we expect to have much less scope to be able to go in and accomplish the repair on.
So why don't I come back if you have other questions? Other questions? Commissioner Min-Wong.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, the deputy said that they're meeting the Canadian content requirement of 25%. Can they tell us how much of it, what percentage is not made in Canada of these streetcars?
What percentage is made outside of Canada?
That's correct.
I don't have the exact number unless we have it. But all I know is
Stated differently, how much of it is Canadian content?
Well, I know it's well above the 25%, and obviously, you know, it may vary. I can get back to you with the exact number. You know, I wish I had that for every single project at any given time, but it's a fairly large number. It's well over 25%.
Okay, well, maybe we can get. Is it over 40%, or I mean, or can you just get?
I'd have to get the number to.
And how much? I mean, this is. I guess one of my colleagues across the table was saying that this mistake was made in Mexico. How much of these streetcars are what percentage is manufactured in Mexico?
Well, the large portion, pretty much the vast majority of the car body portion is built in Mexico. You know, Mexico is a necessary and a required part of our value chain, you know, to compete globally. We have turned over the years, like many other industries, to a global supply chain. In this case, I can guarantee you that we have the capability that's required in Mexico to get the job done. As mentioned by my colleague David, we had definitely underestimated the complexity of the geometry and the complexity of the weld using this duplex stainless steel, and therefore not provided to our internal manufacturing all the tools to get the job done 100% every single time. But I can tell you that as soon as we've corrected that, you know, our Mexican factory has been able to get the job done as we would expect and to the quality standard that you have seen at Bombardier forever and that you can experience in a rocket product today or any other product that's operating here in Ontario.
Just 3 short questions, and I'll stop. How many employees does Bombardier have in Mexico?
We have, for the transport side, around 5,000 people total in Mexico.
And for the transport side, see...
Transport side here.
Transport side, you have 5,000 employees. And the transport side in Ontario, and transport, what I mean is not the aeronautics side, the transport, the rail piece. So that would be, I guess, your facilities in Kingston and North
2,700 people in Ontario.
So you have twice as many people in Mexico than you do here in Canada or in Ontario. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Heisey?
So I wanted to ask about the turnaround on the cars after the weld repair at La Pocatari. So it's 19 weeks a car. There's 67 cars, so 19 weeks is about 5 months a car. Mm-hmm. And we have 61 cars, and I understand from a conservatism perspective, you want to get this done within a 4-year period from today?
That is correct.
Okay. So this may be a question for the CEO and you, I don't know, but can you tell us where you're at? And I presume, given it would be better for us to do this as late as possible so that we get the 67 cars. I think, how many cars are you delivering next year? 77 in 2019. 77 cars next year. The more cars we've got before we start taking cars out of commission, the better for our customers and for our system. So can we discuss that? How many cars can you do at one time in a 5-month period? Can you do 20? Can you do 10? Can you do 5? And how does that fit in with sustaining service? Because we have to pull these cars out of service when we need them.
So let me start by saying, you know, we're having this dialogue daily with the TTC. Obviously, currently, you know, we have a few units that are going to go through the process. We're going to learn from those units. As David mentioned, right, our current assumptions are the worst case scenario. As we start going through 1, 2, or 3 units, we'll learn. And more likely, we're going to find that our assumptions were too conservative, and we can therefore perhaps, you know, change and improve the plan and actually reduce any impact, right, to the available quantity of cars. So clearly, we're going to stay in contact, and we're going to continue. Commitment to the CEO is that we're going to be in full transparency all along.
So can you give me a best case, worst case? So is the 19 weeks the worst case?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
What's the best case?
It would be really speculation right now. Like I said, I expect 2 factors to come into play. 1, productivity of the employees as they process through more and more cars. And 2, the scope that's going to reduce down as cars become more recent and demonstrate the incorporation of process improvements. But I could not speculate as to what that could be reduced down to.
But we're going to, you know, we're guaranteeing, and our commitment is that we're going to have a dedicated crew, and that's going to be completely independent from new car manufacturing. And again, you know, as soon as we see opportunities to improve, we'll definitely, I mean, our objective here is to make it as transparent as possible.
Questions? Commissioners? Okay, yep.
We thank through you. the CEO tracks or puts in his report mean distance between failures, and I think it's 35,000 kilometers for these vehicles. Pardon me, the target, which is the target. Is that a reasonable target? Because we're not achieving that target.
So no, we're not. As a matter of fact, on our latest, we're probably about 2x to the target from a B failure perspective. We basically have two systems that are driving that: the comms and display systems, and the doors. So the doors, we have a fully defined modification program that we are going to be deploying this year. I can tell you that from a comms system, my VP of engineering has a weekly call with the supplier of the comms system, and the action plan is being put into place. I fully expect to be hitting the reliability numbers in the fall of this year.
Can you just comment a little bit about your experiences elsewhere in the world where you have similar vehicles in use?
So these two systems in this industry are always number 1 and 2 in terms of reliability. Each industry has its own. Doors and communication systems are definitely, a sort of an industry challenge. There's only a few players that play in that environment, and again, we're on top of the issue.
So in a year's time, we could see a much better performance in terms of reliability?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Byers with a second round.
Yeah, and just can you remind, regarding the production of the 204 vehicles, as we all know, there have been some delays in the performance there. Can you remind us how many revised schedules have been delivered to this board and to the commission?
Well, I remember my first meeting with your predecessor, Mr. O'Leary. He had mentioned a number of commitments that were made. I definitely have less than anything that he's done and that he's heard in the past. Honestly, we've had one commitment to take the actions to generate the capacity, address, the performance issues that we had. And I can stand tall to tell you today that we have executed on all of those actions without exception. It's a complex product. Other issues have arisen, and we are dealing with them. But our commitment to the TTC from the beginning, haven't been it's been absolutely kept to. And actually, we even gone further, because in the original commitment, Kingston capacity was not in the play, and this was clearly us over-indexing in terms of creating capacity so that we could not only deal with our commitment to deliver by the end of 2019, but at the same time build ourselves some contingency if anything would have happened or could happen in the future.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate you coming before the meeting. Just understand the dynamic in this meeting. I think there's been over a dozen revised schedules, and this has been an unbelievably frustrating experience for this commission, but more importantly for the riders in our system. And for us to have had to defend you, as I've had to do, whenever people see me, it has been difficult, gentlemen. So all I'm saying with this latest welding commitment, should we believe you, or will there be another dozen revised schedules on this?
So I think what we can show you is concrete, specific, measurable actions that have been taking place in the last year and more. This is a complex program. There are complex structures and systems that are involved. It doesn't turn on a dime. The investments that we've made need time to bear fruit, and now we're starting to bear fruit. We invested in La Pocatière to have underframes made out of there to not only complement the capacity out of Mexico, but also to give the direct responsibility of La Pocatière to provide the entire recipe of how you will manufacture this, and to give that to Mexico, and to have the responsibility to oversee that. So not only are they making it, but they have the responsibility to oversee Mexico. So these are very specific things that we've put in place. Other examples, in Mexico, We have gone beyond. We have hired 3 new welding engineers. We are going to hire another 12. We have hired 7 certified welding inspectors, and we're going to hire probably another 7 or 8. Why are we doing this? Because instead of following a standard industry-type inspection protocol, we will, on all these welds that amount to the 1.5%, we will do 100% visual inspection, 100% volumetric inspection, which is X-ray or ultrasonic, and 100% dimensional. Typically, these things follow under an audit plan. This is going to take time and cost, but this is what we're doing to make sure that we can answer the question, can you be sure this won't happen again? This is our response to that.
Other questions? Commissioners, questions? Just a few from me. So you mentioned for the 19 weeks you've allotted to for the repair, that the oldest vehicles you suspect will have maybe the most kind of onerous work that needs to be done. Do you have a sense and kind of like, say, vehicles, closer to 60 through 67, what that time frame might look like, or are you still kind of want to be cautious and not give us that?
We understand there's certain ranges, and
there will be a difference between.
We understand like 58 and up is going to be, we think,
different.
very, very good.
Okay.
And then somewhere in between is kind of a gradual increase.
So as you move towards those vehicles, you expect that you'll be through the TTC reporting. They'll be reporting to us on maybe a different schedule than what we think we might be dealing with today.
Mr. Leary has made it very clear that we must minimize the impact. There's things that we're going to do exactly that, and we're going to continue to work with the TTC. Every opportunity that we have to quicken the turnaround time, that's what you really want to do, is you want to take the 19 weeks and shrink it. Anything that we can do to do that, we will do. Okay, and I think you said that the work that's being done in Mexico, the welding work that's being done there, the output there has been met all your standards and specifications, and you're pleased with the work there. They're kind of on running on all cylinders? Yes.
Okay. Kingston is fully up and running on this line? The first
train is actually in process right now, and it should be ready to deliver in the fall.
And then how much do you expect, what do you expect the Kingston output to be when you're kind of at full capacity there?
Probably somewhere around 2 a month.
2 a month?
Yep.
And Thunder Bay, what's its monthly output expected to be? Or what is it now, and where do you see it going?
So for Thunder Bay, really what we're looking at, if I think about steady state, probably between 6 or 7, roughly. And it's basically one train. Our goal out of Thunder Bay is one train every 3 days, working days.
But even when you get to that 6 or 7, you still are expecting the 2 to be coming out of Kingston?
Absolutely, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's been, as Benoit alluded to before, we've had to go out, because you can have 2 assembly lines if you don't have the parts. It's a very crucial portion of it. So we've gone out and have actually spent money in our supply base to be able to ensure that we can feed both lines.
This might seem like an odd question, but have you been on our old legacy streetcars in this city?
I have not. I've been on the new ones, but I have not.
I have.
Okay, I strongly recommend you take a ride on some of those crowded, leaky beasts of streetcars that are serving our passengers right now. And then my other question, and I expect I know the answer to this, but I should ask it anyways. I hope you realize how essential and important it is to get these streetcars on our streets as quickly as possible to serve our passengers.
Hey, absolutely. I would say I'm probably here in Toronto every other week. As much as I feel pride, I also, when I see them coming down the street, I also realize that, there's a real issue, like many other large cities around the world, and we want to be part of the solution, and we understand that being part of the solution is getting the cars out there to you, at the quality and the reliability and the availability level that you deserve. So it's been 150% of my focus ever since I started on this job. I can't say that I walked in here in 2016 not knowing there was an issue. right? I wanted to be part of the solution. I think David is the same, and there's thousands of people behind. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify one number, because I talked about 5,000 people in Mexico. There's 250 of the 5,000 in Mexico people that are actually on TTC. So it's not like I have 5,000 people working on TTC products in Mexico. It's 250, so just to balance.
The direct comparison is we have 575 in Ontario working on TTC, and we have 250 in Mexico.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being here today, and we look forward to hearing good news out of Bombardier going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know people have questions about just the CEO's report in general, and so we'll start Commissioner Fragedakis' questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So on page 12, it notes that BYD has indicated that the delivery of the first bus will likely slip to beyond the fourth quarter of 2018. So I was wondering, how worried should we be that this may mean further deliveries from BYD will be delayed, since we are following on the heels of other delays?
Sorry, yeah, just there's a bit of chatter around the horseshoe. Can you just, I don't know, you want to just maybe restate your question there?
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. On page 12, it notes that BYD has indicated that the delivery of the first bus will likely slip to beyond the fourth quarter of 2018, and I was wondering how worried we should be that this may mean that further deliveries from BYD will be delayed.
Hello? It's expected.
I know, it's a shock.
It's expected that BYD will give us a revised schedule in the coming weeks, but right now they're indicating that it could be as late as June when we get the first. That is June of next year, of course. So a 6-month.
So did you? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
So that would be a 6-month delay to the.
The first delivery would come 6 months late. So obviously, then we should be worried that further deliveries from BYD will be delayed, because if the first one is coming in June of 2019,
they'd all be delivered within roughly a month. So it's a fairly quick delivery rate once it starts, but they're indicating that the production and delivery wouldn't start until that time frame. They're looking at contingencies to potentially move it forward back to earlier in the year, but there will be a slip.
So can we expect that revised schedule at the next board meeting, I guess, in December?
Yes, definitely.
This year? Okay.
And maybe through the Vice Chair, I have a question of staff as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Do you believe these electric bus orders are because the production capacity is not there, or is it because people have already ordered their buses and we've sort of got to get in line to get our fair share, if you will?
They haven't provided a reason, but it is reasonable to assume that they have bus orders secured ahead of ours, and so our production slots have been moved down the line.
And through you, Mr. Vice Chair, and do you think it came as a surprise to some of these manufacturers that we did double our order of their products?
Well, they were aware of the motion coming out of the November 2017 board meeting, which asked us to consider that should the PTIF window be extended. So no, I don't think it came as a surprise.
So then you think they do have I'll call it a vested financial interest to get us really good buses really fast?
Yes, they do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Byers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. New CEO. First of all, Rick, I'm absolutely delighted with your appointment, and we're all very fortunate to have you here at the TTC, so thank you. So now, delay minutes. I'm looking at the graphs for line 1 and 2 delays on pages 29, 30, and 33, 34, and look, we talked about this before and whatnot, but in looking particularly at the delay incidents on line 1 and line 2, so that's pages 29 and 33, literally for the last, from 2014 to 18, I'm just questioning whether our target is reasonable or not. We've said 40% below 2014 levels, and we're just clearly not there, particularly on the incident side, and I know some of this stuff is perhaps increasingly out of our control, but is it worth kind of taking a more realistic target on some of these things to make sure we meet them? Or is there something that you have in your, new approach which will allow us to get, down to those target levels as we really want to?
Through the chair. So first, let me say I agree with you. The targets, the target of 50% delay reduction over 5 years was ambitious. And as you can see, it's very difficult to achieve. As part of Rick's mandate, he's asked me to take a look at all of the KPIs that we use to measure subway service quality, to take a fresh set of eyes to what we're looking at, what the industry looks at. The industry does not look at delay incidents in minutes typically. There's a number of other measures that more accurately reflect the customer experience, and we're going to take a look at those, and I'll feed that back to the CEO.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. On ridership, now this is the chart on page 22. This, I must say, as I took a closer look, it's quite a, so in the months of July and August, and you'll remind me of what the specific, so in 2017, we had a big dip down, unlike any of the previous 3 years, and I know our budget has a big dip down for ridership in the summer months, whereas that was not the case in 2016, 15, and 14. What's going on with that chart, and why the dip in ridership over the summer months?
Sorry, through the chair. Generally, you will see a dip in ridership over the summer months. That is consistent. You do have anomalies in certain years where there may have been Pan Am games or other factors which would have drove the ridership up over that period. Otherwise, you would generally see that dip over that time frame.
Good. Okay, questions from Commissioner Campbell?
I want to come back to the delay incidents. There's two references to the causes being attributed to passengers, and that being the highest preponderance of delay incidents. How many passenger emergency alarm incidents are actually emergencies? I'll give you a little anecdotal. I was on the subway one day. A girl's mobile phone gets stolen. Lady shouts, "Push the emergency button." Being a commissioner, I said, "Don't push the emergency button."
Good for you.
So, no. Happily, it was the only casualty was the loss of the cell phone. So, how often are they real emergencies, and how often? What is the preponderance of non-emergency stoppages?
So, through the chair, first let me thank you for assisting us with preventing an emergency alarm. So I don't have the direct numbers in front of me. Approximately 6,000 emergency alarms activations per year. Approximately 50% are found to be false alarms. Where it gets difficult is in the other 50%. What percentage of those could have been addressed by a customer leaving the train and activating the intercom at the DWA or the designated waiting area, or seeking out station staff to assist them with a lost phone or something like that? That's where it gets a little bit more difficult to determine, but definitely 50% are when our staff show up and say, "Who pressed the alarm?" Nobody says anything.
Right, and are we doing anything? What are we doing? This may be not as a question for you, but maybe it's for communications. What are we doing to communicate to passengers when there is an occurrence of a real emergency and when it is not a real emergency, such as a cell phone being stolen? So,
sorry, Commissioner, you just
the question is, what are we doing as a commission? What are we doing as a company to communicate properly to our customers when is a real emergency and when it is not a real emergency? And if somebody misses their stop, that's not an emergency.
So the proper use of the emergency alarm is what you're talking about. So we have a campaign that is out there that really that talks about the emergency alarm as thinking of 911. So if you want a first responder, whether it's police, fire, or EMS to attend a scene, that's when you would use the emergency alarm, just like you would if you were to call 911. That's what the yellow alarm is, the emergency alarm is for, that yellow strip, is if you want police, fire, or EMS. And that's the message we're trying to get through to our customers so that they're not using it for information. And that's, in fact, why we changed the name of it from passenger assistance alarm to emergency alarm.
So given that these incidents don't seem to be decreasing to any degree, I mean, how good a job are we doing at communicating to our passengers?
Well, that's so. I guess it really depends on the situation. I mean, perhaps people are using it in more appropriate times. We know that if there are delays, for example, in the system, we are going to see an increase in the number of emergency alarms because of people feeling faint, for example. So, I think we do see a decrease in the number of what we might call false alarms. That is alarms where people actually say, no, it's not an emergency. I used it for something else. We're not seeing those types of incidents, but it's something we need to continue to communicate and continue to keep on top of, no doubt.
Next question is in regard to Presto. It's referenced on page 23. Customer journeys are, continue to rise sort of modestly, but we're $2.5 million below budget. So what drove that aggressive budget such to the point that we're really not, the ridership pickup is not what we had anticipated for Presto?
So I'll take that question. The projected budget ridership was based on what we understood to be the functionality and the plans to deliver, when we created the budget in 2017. And as we know now that where the actual functionality is going to fit, as you heard from the CEO's report, now the FMVD machines are in. We're going to have passes on Presto, September. So I think essentially it was a guess, and I think we missed what we've now agreed on with Presto at that time.
So I want to follow up on a question that I posed to you in an email, and that's about having a 30-day Presto pass. Does Metrolinx have the software capability of enabling us to implement a 30-day pass rather than a monthly pass?
I believe so. We have never made that specific request for a 30-day pass, and as I indicated in my response to you, we'll be coming back in Q1 of 2019 with a sort of, I'll call it a menu, fare policy, and options that we can fully costed and impacts with ridership, et cetera, that we will present to the board, and that options around multi-day passes will be included.
And then last quick question is, are we are tracking the number of rides per Metro Pass taken by Metro Pass Presto users, and what are we finding?
We have the data. I can't speak to the actual number at this point. I mean, the uptake for the Presto passes is around, I think we're at about 3% of the total, or maybe 5% of the total Metro passes being sold on Presto. We'll be able to have a better, so that data probably isn't that reliable at this point. When all the passes are, September is a sort of a good indicator, will be a good indicator towards the end of the year when we'll have actual, and we stop selling the passes in December.
But are we seeing?
And that will inform the fare policy that we bring back to you.
You're at
Matt, I'm over.
You're at 6 and a bit.
Very long answers, then I guess.
Long questions. Long questions. Other questions? Briefer ones. Yep, Commissioner Fragedakis.
So this is in regards to the tragedies that have happened at track level. The one that was not a suicide and the two that were suicide. And you mentioned in your CEO's report that you were going to be looking at these, I don't know what you call them, but the guards.
Platform edge doors.
Yes, platform edge doors. And you were going to be coming back in 2020. It's 2018, and then we've had quite a a number of tragedies happen in a very short period of time. Is there any way that that report could come back sooner, like in 2019, for example? I realize that you have a lot of work to do, but given the severity of the situation, and not just for, you know, the people who have died, but also for their families and for the people who are passengers on the system who are witnesses to that, as well as the staff who are witnesses to that too.
Through the chair, we are working with our operations group to define the requirements of the PEDs, platform edge doors, particularly interfaces with automatic train control. Newer technologies now trying to leverage experience of other systems. We're going to finalize that RFP, trying to get it on the street as soon as we can, hoping to get a consultant on board in Q1 of next year. We'll put this together as quickly as we can, but right now we've got everything lined up to go.
So which leads me to my second question about automatic train control signals on line 2 and how that's moving along, and any updates?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did identify in the CEO's report the fact that I've had a consultant to review the existing Line 1 ATC program. Under the direction of the chair, I've been taking a look at all the different major capital programs for budget and schedule. As you're aware, last month was the first time we brought a schedule for Presto, for instance, although we've had a number of discussions with it. ATC is in the exact same category. I'm doing a review now of the implementation of Line 1 with the intent of the publicly discussed implementation through 2020. So I'm looking at that right now as we, again, start the 2019 capital budget process to look at what else we can do when we expand that to Line 2. So that's still under review as well.
Thanks.
Other questions? I'll just quickly ask, just as a follow-up to Commissioner Campbell's excellent questions. So there's obviously the take-up of MetroPass on Presto is not quite where we want it to be. MetroPass sales are down. I'm just thinking maybe this is like too much of just a silly retail strategy, and the mayor might throw something at me if he hears me say this, but is there a consideration that we just want to say, like, let's make MetroPasses for everyone, $99, and if you're going to do it on Presto, to migrate people in much greater numbers and that much more quickly, especially we know the trip multiples are not in the 70s like we had been told or just how we had thought for so many years. And could that be a way to drive people to Presto and to get an uptick in MetroPass sales, just by using the one tool we have being pricing? And will that be coming back? You say here that the research is underway to analyze changes in the monthly MetroPass. Will that kind of pricing tool be part of that research and analysis that will come forward?
Yeah, I think like I said, once the Presto data matures and we'll be able to provide, take the costing and the impact to revenue that some kind of pricing like that will have, we'll have to bring that back to the board for your full consideration. I mean, it's very likely that, or not very likely, it could happen that we come back and recommend a lower price point for the MetroPass based on the actual usage of past customers. Everyone who will, and that might pull people over to the pass if we change the pricing in 2019. People who are MetroPass users now will not be able to buy the plastic pass that they're used to by January, so they're going to have to make the transition over. But what we do see, and you see it in the average fare price, and we see it in customer behavior, is people, I think, are perhaps looking at their own economics, their own usage, their own travel patterns, and checking out Presto as on the e-purse.
Yeah. And we've kind of, it's been identified that while MetroPass sales are declining or flat, student MetroPass sales are through the roof, but conveniently student enrollment in the city is not increased by that amount. So, I mean, we can do our own conclusions. I mean, is it also time to, just have one MetroPass? And I randomly throw out a $99 number where students, seniors, and adults just have one price MetroPass, so we can also eliminate the fraud that's happening, or I think might be happening, with students, adults using student passes.
I think we want to bring back a simpler fare media menu to the board in Q1, and that would be a consideration whether we get rid of something like post-secondary pass or not, or we actually have to provide more choice. That will be something for the board to consider in Q1.
Great, thank you very much. So with that, I will move receipt of the CEO's report. All those in favor? Do Oh, sorry. Does anyone want to speak on that? No, it's not that. So if you just will bear with me and indulge me, we're going to take a quick pause. Don't leave, though, in between items number 1 and 2. And I want to take this moment to thank a few of our passengers. Kyle Busquin, Julio Cabrera, and Jahangir Fazal for their quick thinking and swift action on Thursday, June 28th. On the afternoon of the 28th, a visually impaired passenger fell to track level from the westbound platform at Broadview Station. The man called for help, and 3 customers sprang into action. Track power was cut, and the nearby emergency phone was used to connect with transit control. All 3 men jumped down to track level to help the injured commuter and were instrumental in returning the man to the platform safely. Certainly their actions deserve to be commended. We want to also thank the TTC staff. I might add, do this on far too many occasions and things like this, for their assistance, diligence, and rapid response. This is not the only time passengers have sprung to the aid of one of their fellow commuters. It happens actually quite regularly. I think we've got to commend them, and just note that in Toronto this does happen on a daily basis, where Good Samaritans step forward quite often. It's also TTC staff every day, drivers, collectors, supervisors, janitors, who regularly go above and beyond to help our customers. So now I have to do my little bit of public service announcement here, just quickly. This reminds us that if there's ever a customer in distress, customers can cut track power by using the blue emergency buttons on either end of the subway platform. The button, there's a phone that connects customers directly with transit control. And each platform also has a designated waiting area with a camera and an intercom that connects anyone on the platform with the station collector. So again, we want to thank Kyle, Julio, and Jahangir, but we also have Mayor Tory here, who I know wants to say a couple words of thanks and commendation too, and maybe if you just want to come over here to use this microphone.
I don't want to take away for a moment, but I won't have another chance to, just because I'm in the room at the same day after the Toronto Star made the announcement and then the commission and the commission confirmed it. I want to congratulate Rick Leary, and I was not involved. I was kept updated on the selection process by Chair.
Still hasn't signed the documents.
But I know, I understand that, but I'm trusting. But I just want to say congratulations. And when he informed me what the outcome of that process, I was delighted because you're a capable, competent, dedicated person who stands up for your team too. You work with them and stand up for them, and I want to just say thank you. And speaking of standing up for the team, I want to just say to Kylo and Julio and Jahangir, when I was asked on the day that you did what you did, what I thought of that, I said it's an extraordinary act, but it is kind of the Toronto way. We step forward for each other, and there were people who were saying that I should urge, as I should upon you in congratulating you, a degree of caution about these things and, make sure that we rely on our emergency personnel and so forth. But you did what everybody's instinct would be to do, and you did it in a way that brought credit to yourselves and brought great credit to the city in terms of that's how we sort of look after each other in the city. And so I just want to say thank you on behalf of all the people. Add my thanks to that of Chair Josh Coles and the members of the Commission and all the members of City Council and all the people of Toronto for the example that you set and for the heroic act that you performed. And I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to announce this or not, but especially...
A new CO do that.
Oh, that's fine. I just had it in my notes, and that's fine. And I'm assuming he's announcing this, technology permitting, after all the questions I heard just a few moments ago. But do you want this mic here, Rick?
Say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's my pleasure to give each one of you a Presto card with 1 year free service on the city.
I want to be beside Julio. I hang with him every day. Hey.
Yeah, go for it. You're good.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. If we can kind of get everyone to refocus, we'll move on to item number 2. So item number 2, it would be our ACAT minutes, and I think Raymond Delara, our chair, is going to get set up at a microphone so he can introduce those minutes for us. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Cole. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, on behalf of the Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit, I want to congratulate Mr. Rick Leary on his new position as CEO. We look forward to working with him to continue our shared commitment to accessibility at the TTC. I'd like to now share the highlights from our recently approved May minutes. The Design Review Subcommittee reviewed the Lawrence Station easier access designs. This project will see the installation of 2 elevators connecting the fare concourse, buses, and trains, and is scheduled for completion in 2023. The Design Review Subcommittee also was given a presentation from Stantec Consulting, who showed their accessibility audit findings on subway stations for the implementation of Family of Services. The audit grouped observations into 4 categories: infrastructure, path of travel, user information, and supplemental amenities. From the audit findings, Design Review was able to isolate several issues for further study and action. Findings were separated into short-term and long-term action items. The Service Planning Subcommittee reviewed a proposal for parallel bus routes along Line 2 to address crowding during rush hours and improve connectivity to accessible subway stations. Staff performed research and concluded that it was both impractical and not cost-effective to go further with that initiative. At the Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee, ACAT had recommended that measures be taken to improve the ride quality of the new ProMaster buses, which have been found to be bumpy and uncomfortable. Staff provided an update that the ProMaster buses are to be retrofitted with better suspensions, after which ACAT members will be able to test these ride characteristics to confirm their improvement. That concludes our highlights. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Of staff? No, yeah. Anyone want to, question of staff from Commissioner DeBaremaker.
I'm not sure if our, who I'm asking questions to. I'll address to the chair and our almost CEO. The issue of the, I'll call it the bumpy ride for Wheel-Trans customers, was that identified first by our transit staff and brought to the committee, or was it people from the accessibility committee saying, hey, we got new buses, but we're not really enjoying the ride and we'd like you to look into it? So again, I'm just not sure which came first. Was it the citizens on the committee that brought this issue to our attention?
Hi, good afternoon. Through the chair, so we tested the ProMaster amongst 2 other vehicles as well, including the Mercedes Sprinter, and it was identified that the ride would be extremely different from the current Friendlies, and that the use of the vehicles would be different. So I would say that we identified that initially that the ride would be different from the current vehicle.
And through you, Mr. Chair, different is, I'll call it a neutral term. When we're changing buses, we would say it will be a better ride? Like why, I guess, if you knew it was going to be different and you thought different meant worse, wouldn't we have taken corrective action before our Wheel-Trans passengers experienced it for themselves and said, we don't like this different. It's not as good as it was before. That's I'm trying to get that, what happened first.
So it was identified that the ride was different in that the suspension was firmer and not as soft, which for some customers found that not unpleasant. This was tested by ACAT, and it wasn't necessarily brought forward as a showstopper, shall we say. And then when we issued the procurement we partnered with Metrolinx for the procurement, so this wasn't a TTC procured vehicle. It was the partnership with Metrolinx, and this was the vehicle that was got through the process. Just a reminder, though, that this vehicle, we are only purchasing 80 of them, and that we are looking at a friendly replacement, which would be a different type of vehicle.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, I think this helps clarify it for me. So we did involve the accessible community as we were selecting that vehicle. We acted in good faith. They acted in good faith. There was an awareness that it was different or firmer, but it was really, I guess, when we put it on the street, some people, I guess, contacted their friends and colleagues on the committee to say, this is, we really can't sustain this. We don't want this to be here for the next 5 or 8 years.
So through the chair, we have almost 30 of these vehicles now in service. And yes, the testing was real live trips with prototype vehicles with ACAP members only at that time. Now that we have approximately 30 out and that the vehicles are used all day, every day in service, we have more customers on board, leading to more comments from customers. However, the nature of the trips have changed in that they are on board the vehicle for less time. Our average trip length is shorter, so they are not on board the trip for necessarily across the city as they used to be.
And I think our ACAT rep said that better suspension system will help solve the problem. Is that what we're looking at now as a commission with those vehicles?
I'm sorry, better suspension or a different vehicles of those?
Well, yeah, either or.
I would have to put that over to vehicle engineering as to if we are putting any modifications are at this time.
Yeah, so we are looking at working on a softer suspension as a mod to the ProMaster vehicle, and
so it's a modification.
It's a modification, and then we're also looking at a different vehicle altogether, both through another joint procurement process with Metrolinx as well as in parallel.
And I am, through Mr. Chair, I'm assuming we're doing that in cooperation, conjunction with the accessible community to make sure that if we do pick modifications or a new suspension system, that they've tried it out and said, yeah, given where we've come, we think this is the right option.
Yes, we always do it in partnership with ACAT as a minimum and often a larger group than that. But as was described, the early evaluation can only tell you so much, right? So we learn and we make improvements as we go along. That's
okay, great.
Part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other questions? Anyone want to speak on this? I'll just quickly speak as I move the motion, I guess, to receive this. With it being the end of the term, I think it's important, obviously, to thank ACAT for all the work they do. So many of these initiatives that come before us are driven by them or pushed by them. This term, we've added 5 new accessible subway stations to get our count up to 44. We've got new accessible station entrances at Queen's Park and at Shepherd. We've piloted a program to improve the platform gaps. Low-floor streetcars now operating on 5 streetcar routes. Over 250 transit stops are made accessible, and hundreds more are going to be. We actually have now retired all of our old buses so that our entire bus fleet is low floor. Installed the blue priority seating areas in all TTC vehicles. We've retrofitted all Toronto Rocket trains to add exterior door chimes, intercar barriers, improved handholds based on advice from ACAT. Of course, we've introduced the Wheel-Trans 10-year strategy and that transformation plan. We've revamped and expanded Wheel-Trans eligibility. We've launched the community bus, family of services, and travel training initiatives. We built the TTC's first access hub at Meadowvale Loop, installed wayfinding beacons at St. Clair Station in collaboration with the CNIB. And really, I mean, so much of that is because of this board, but also because of the work that ACAT does, continuing to push staff, board, making these issues of public importance. So there's a lot of work still to be done. We know that, but thank you, ACAT, for your work. And I'll move receipt of those monthly minutes. All those in favor? That carries. We are on to item number 6. That's the 2018 mid-year workforce increase. Commissioner Campbell, I believe, held that item. He had questions, and I'll hand it to you for those questions.
So through you, Mr. Chair, given that the increase...
I have a point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm just checking if we missed a speaker.
Okay, so item number 6, there has been a request for a late request for a deputation from Emily Daig on the, what is this, on the mid-year workforce increase.
Sure.
Moved by Commissioner DeBaymaker. All those in favor? Okay, so Emily?
21, were you supposed to do that?
We're doing it after number 13. Yeah.
Hey guys, so I was 35 minutes late asking to deputate, and I was denied because of bylaw, but that's fine. Thank you for letting me speak. My one issue with this is that, why is it that those of us with physical disabilities cannot apply to work for the red smock jobs? I was supposed to be one of the ambassadors many years ago when it was first thought of, and people that I dropped through the cracks. People just kept giving me platitudes and nothing else. There should be 2 levels of people on the red smock jobs, people that can go both underground and above ground, and then those of us that can go just on the above ground special events and shutdowns, assisting people. I know the system like the back of my hand, as do many people in my situation and many people with disabilities. And I wish Josh wasn't leaving because he needs to hear this. Okay. Oh, hello, Ellen. But people with disabilities, TTC won this diversity hiring award. And I hate to say this, but I nearly puked. Do we really hire diversity? Yeah, we hire diversity of able-bodied, but what disabled people do we hire off the street to be some of the faces of TTC, to be some of these people with the red smocks? Currently, if a disabled person tries to approach most of these people, they try to run away. They don't know how to deal with people like me. They don't know how to deal with people with guide dogs and people that are blind. I, as a person with multiple disabilities, know every single way to get around the system, avoiding this subway, avoiding inaccessible stations. I know my way, and I have for a long time, from Union Station all the way to Far East Scarborough without using GO train, without using subway, without using streetcars. Same with Etobicoke. Why is it that the Diversity Hiring Award is won when you truly don't deserve it? I want you to check yourselves in the mirror, each and every one of you, on this commission. How many of you have disabilities? Every time I've applied as a citizen appointment to this committee, I get declined because I don't have the educational requirements. But people with disabilities aren't even, with physical disabilities, are not even represented on city council. We're not represented by anyone. We need, and Rick, you've been in a wheelchair on the TTC. Andy was as well. Andy's now in New York kicking accessibility butt. Thank you, Andy. But where's the hiring of people with disabilities? Yes, you hire them for phones. You hire, the employees that have been injured, employees that, can't work the buses or streetcars or whatnot anymore, or wheel-trans. Sure, they get the jobs. And I believe in unions all the way. But those of us with physical disabilities should be allowed to work as faces of the TTC for information for people when we know the system. Or even as people that would help you guys be able to make that diversity hiring award actually worth more than toilet paper from your subway stations where you don't even have an emergency button for those of us if we fall in the wheelchair stall. I've fallen, I was knocked out, I was out for 3 hours. You won't hire us. When you're done with those contracted companies, when they're done the whole process, the hiring, before the hiring, the questionnaires and all that, the final question they ask is, can you get somebody out of the subway in an emergency? Well, of course we can. And that's the question that stops us from working. So that's discriminatory in itself, that you don't have two sides of the red smocks, that you don't have opportunities for those of us with disabilities would love this system. I fight every single day for this system, and each and every one of you know this. I hold your feet to the fire each and every day. I'm not paid for it. I've done 28 years of accessibility advocacy. I'm not paid for it. Is my time worthless? Are people with disabilities worthless to you? Because quite clearly, with the last conversation about the ProMaster buses, you guys should have known that those of us in chairs feel bumps worse. Quite clearly, when you guys aren't demanding that Bombardier apologize to those of us in wheelchairs and those of us with physical disabilities and the elderly, we're worthless to you. You may say accessibility, but how many of you have gotten off your able-bodied butt into a wheelchair and ridden around this system and seen how much of a failure it is?
If you could wrap it up.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Heisey. I'm going to say one last thing. Those of us that lived in Scarborough know what a one-stop subway is. Those of us want to work for you guys. Why is it that you win diversity hiring awards when it's an absolute crock?
So I move a motion to pass the resolution that was passed in camera. Oh, sorry, John, you have questions?
No. Oh, on this item, yeah. I thought you meant of the deputy. No, I have no question of the deputy. On the item, I do. Shall I proceed? Okay. Yeah, the question is, so if these employees are being hired because of the contractual, I have no questions of the deputy. This is of staff.
He didn't even ask.
So this is the reason for the hiring is to increase workforce resiliency, and it's in response to a position that the union has taken. So to increase, so that means we have to hire people to work hours to do what we need to have done that would otherwise be done by other workers who would have worked those hours. So I have to assume that there's no increase in hours that are being asked and required to work. Why then is there the increased cost?
Rick, who should answer that? Finance, okay.
The costs associated, through the chair, thank you for the question. The costs associated with the increase are set out on page 2. And there's a couple of reasons for the increased costs. The first is that overtime is not the only thing that is going on here. So there is a significant reduction in overtime pay. That's only part of what is going on. Another thing that is going on is that we've got the new paid emergency leave requirements, which either had to be covered off through more overtime or more staff, but one way that's causing staff to not be available that we need to cover off. And then we need to do a better job of covering off the capital project requirements, the capital closures. So it's not just related to overtime. It's overtime, in fact, only accounts for about half of the increased cost.
So, okay, so I'm still unclear. The union took a position that 48 hours was as much as they were going to work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So, and we otherwise would have wanted workers to work 60 or 70 hours. So there's a certain number of hours that we wanted to get out of our workforce that we're not able to get, and we're hiring to stopgap those hours, to cover those hours off. Is that correct?
We've eliminated the overtime hours, and but we need additional people. So we are saving about $7 million worth of overtime.
Right.
But that money then is plowed back into regular hour wages.
Right.
As to about half of the total increase.
So are we hiring more people? Is the number of hours that the TTC is employing workers in this context, are there more hours? I have to assume that more hourly wages are being paid as a result of these changes, when I would have thought it would have been neutral.
So if I may, when it comes to crewing efficiencies, in the past there are a number of crews that exceeded 40 hours, and in preparing ourselves to split some of these crews that would exceed 44 hours, so for the same level of service, it would require 2 operators instead of 1. So it becomes a function of crewing efficiency, just how tightly you can match the available workforce to the amount of hours required to service. And in some cases where, to use the same number of headcount, you would end up stranding the operator out there. You have to split it, and what one operator used to do now is 1+. So that explains the increase in headcount.
And so that increase in headcount and hours paid out, right? Hours that we have to hire people.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone want to speak to this? You want to move the? Okay, the staff recommendation has been moved by Commissioner Campbell. All those in favor? No opposed. That carries. Item number 9. We have Deputant. This is the financial update for the period ended June 2nd, 2018. And I have a John Danino on my list. Is that yours, Hansi?
We're number 9, sir?
Is Mr. Danino here? No? Okay. So we'll bring it to questions of staff, starting with Commissioner Fragakis.
Yeah.
Byers, Heisey.
I have a quick question. It relates to page 5 of the report, and it says that lower than budgeted Presto adoption rate and associated transaction costs, as well as lease savings for TTC facilities. And I was just wondering, of that $6.6 million, how much is attributed to Presto and how much is attributed to lease savings?
Through the chair, I can speak to lease savings. Through the municipal capital facilities designation, we're forecasting a $2.5 million savings in our leases this year.
So the remainder, I guess, is then for Presto from the $6.6 million.
Yeah, that is correct. The remainder predominantly would come through Presto adoption rates.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Oh, sorry, I already said it's Byers and Heisey.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the update and also appreciate the control of expenditures. We've had a period of lower revenue. Sorry, the organization's made efforts to reduce expenditures. In reading through some of the explanations, curious, we've had some reductions in utility prices and energy. Curious about the reductions in expenditures. How many are kind of due to the environment being fortunate, which is always good, and how many were due to actions taken by the organization to control expenditures during this first part of the year?
Through the chair, so what you're seeing within the financial update is actions that were taken to reduce expenditures were generally taken as part of the 2018 budget process. So we would reduce the budget and the coinciding reduction in the actuals, but you wouldn't see a variance generated from that. The variance that you're seeing in this report is really generated through environment, as you indicated, reduced hydro rates, lower adoption rates on Presto, and elements to that fact.
Vice Chair Heisey.
This is a question for the Chief Financial Officer through you, Mr. Chair. I noticed in the recommendation of the board that we are ratifying a sole source contract amendment that I guess has already been approved internally.
The work has already been done and completed, yes.
Okay, so how does that happen, that you have an amendment of that size without a board decision? Why does it need ratification? Why wasn't the decision made prior to this time?
It's a two-part answer, and on the substance of the work, I'll defer to my colleague Jim on that one, but through the chair. So we have a signing authority policy that says that a contract, once it's been a contract for more than $5 million, once it's been approved at least once by the board, it does not need approval again by the board unless there's a budgeted amount being spent that's more than $2.5 million. So for example, if you have a $10 million contract and it's going up by $1 million, the board already approved the $10 million. The individual increase of $1 million is less than 2.5, and therefore the board would not have to approve it. So in this particular case, we had, simplifying the story, but I think substantively staying accurate, we had two smaller amounts. They were not thought to require board approval. It was realized that it was really a single piece of work for $4 million, and it required board approval. But the work had already been done. The work had already been authorized and was completed.
So to build on your example of our policy allowing for increases in contracts without board approval, where the original contract was above $5 million, and you gave an example of a $10 million contract with a $1 million amendment. How many $1 million amendments could there be to that $10 million original contract without it having to come back to the board?
Through the chair, I'll have a two-part answer. As long as they were budgeted and unrelated amounts, in theory, an unlimited number. But there's an implied second part, I think, to your question, which is, and that's an unusual practice. In my own experience of previous organizations, I've not seen the ability to be able to increase a board-approved contract other than maybe a small amount. And so one of the things that I'd be interested to do is to review the current signing authority policy and procurement approval policy and ask the question over the next number of months, what would be a more typical practice? What would be a more typical approval policy?
In your experience at other organizations, what has been the level of materiality that requires a board review to approve an increase?
Well, usually you have a contingency amount, which is part of the original approval.
Right.
And then beyond that, you might be able to approve by $1 million or $2 million for little small variations going on. And I would defer to others in the room who, I mean, there are certainly several people in the room with considerable corporate practice. I've never myself seen an approval policy that says you can continue to leverage an existing contract as long as the amount is less than some amount. In the case of the TTC, $2.5 million.
Okay, so I'd like to speak to that.
Okay, Lalonde Campbell.
Yeah, I had a question on the average fares, which are above budget. And the question relates to Presto. My recollection is that we were advised that as other systems have implemented electronic payment, their experience has been an increase in ridership that goes along with that. I don't know if that's correct memory or not, but that's what I recall. I don't recall having heard anything about experience with average fares. Does anyone know whether what we're experiencing is consistent with what other organizations have experienced when they've gone to electronic fare collection? Or are there other things going on here that we think are resulting in the average fare increase?
Through the chair, if I'm not mistaken, the experience pretty universally is that the average fare goes up a bit as people convert from monthly use to more finely tuned electronic, in some case per use use. And as a consequence of change in measurement, the reported out number of riders go down, but you have an offset between your higher average fare and your lower counted ridership using the different electronic system so that it ends up more or less the same. And that's what we're experiencing here. It's going to be very interesting, which I think gets to the interesting, it's sort of like the word we were using different a little earlier in the meeting. It's going to be very important, let me use a stronger word, for us to closely watch the ridership Presto data, because clearly if a number of our riders find that the monthly Metro Pass doesn't offer them the value that a per use does, especially now that we've introduced the 2-hour transfer, we may see continued increase in a conversion away from the monthly pass to the per use pass, which could actually hurt our revenues going forward overall. So we're watching that very closely, and certainly finance is working closely with Kirsten and her Presto team to understand those trends as soon as we can and make fair recommendations, whether it's discounting the Metro Pass fare or whatever it is.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Campbell.
So my question is for the head of Finance and Treasury. It's in regard to the numbers you sent me yesterday. When I look at this, it looks like our passenger revenues are actually ahead by $20 million year to date. 518.4 this year compared to 498.1 last year. Is that correct?
That is correct for the first 5 months.
First 5 months. So then why are we projecting a year-end decline in revenue? So we're still projecting to be, we're projecting a year-end drop of 8.3 million. So that's, between now and then, that's it's like a $29 million drop.
Through the chair, so we are projecting a drop in revenue compared to budget. However, by year end, when you compare the revenues that we project that we're going to experience in 2018 compared to 17, it's a slight increase of just barely about $2 million. The reason that you'd see a swing, what we've seen in the first 5 months, which was around 23 million compared to where we are at the end, is really twofold. The first is there was a fare increase approved as part of the 2017 process. And what you have is you have tokens that would have been purchased prior to the fare increase in December of 2016, that when that revenue comes in the first month, it actually comes in and gets recorded at the lower fare. So when you compare the January to January, you're seeing an increase in revenue. That's not going to trend for the rest of the year. The second factor is there's a $5 million dip in projected revenue going forward compared to 17 once you implement the 2-hour time-based transfer. And those two factors account for the swing.
Yes, the 2-hour time-based transfer, right, correct. Yes, I forgot about that. Okay, so we're ahead 20 million, but we're projecting to be down by the end of the year. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? No? Anyone want to speak on this item? No, I think Vice Chair Heisey wants to speak.
I wanted to know if we were going to get a report back. It sounded like we are from the director on the whole issue of the policy and contract amendments. Is there some, I'd just like a commitment. I'd like a commitment on the record to that.
Staff undertakes to report back in an early 2019 meeting on this.
Perfect, thanks.
Good. Good, thank you. Okay, so Vice Chair Heisey will move the staff recommendation. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just one quick comment. It would be very much welcomed by me and I think other commissioners if when this information is presented, if we can see actual year-to-date versus prior year-to-date, and then also to budget. So basically adding that little bit of information so we know where we are to last year, because I think that sometimes, when we're comparing to a budget that maybe wasn't necessarily realistic or was unattainable, it makes us look worse off than we really are. And in this case, we're actually $20 million in the black ahead of last year in terms of revenues. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
And you move the staff recommendations. Great. All in favor? Thanks. Item number 12, Scarborough Subway Extension Procurement Amendment Authorization, held by Commissioner Byers, I believe.
I guess I wasn't clear on what this was all about. I don't know whether you can provide a quick explanation. So we're amending 2 contracts. We're swinging $26 million between them. I don't know, any other color you can provide on it? Any other color you can provide on what we're doing here?
Through the chair, I'll let Gary Downey, our Chief Project Manager for the Scarborough Subway Extension, answer that question, please, Commissioner.
Originally, when we actually estimated the cost for the upset limit in these purchase orders, Scarborough was an inline station, and now it's reverted to the terminal station, which it makes it much more complex. Add to that, it's the size and the complexity, plus the bus terminal's been in there, so we've had to reverse the totals roundabout effectively. So it's becoming more expensive, and a terminal is much more expensive than an inline station. Therefore, we've got to change the appropriate budgets for these stations.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, fine, thank you. Sure. Commissioner Byers, I'll take it that you'll move those recommendations, and Commissioner Fragedakis has asked for a recorded vote. All those in favor? Byers, Campbell, Lalonde, Cole, Min Wong, De Laurentiis, De Bearmaker opposed, Heisey, and Fragedakis. Item number 13, we have a late request to depute. This is the Yonge Subway Extension station design, and this is from Emily Daig. So I'm going to need a motion for to allow Emily to add her name to the deputation list. Moved by Commissioner De Bearmaker. All those in favor? She is not in the room, so we'll have to pass on that one. So go to questions on item 13, starting with Commissioner Fragedakis, and then Byers.
So on page 8, the report mentions some of what's passed at the council meeting in May of this year, and as part of that item, council had passed the following, that council reaffirmed the position that it will not agree to an extension of the Yonge North subway line unless construction of the relief line south, including required improvements to the Yonge Bloor station, has been fully funded with a firm schedule for completion. If projects proceed concurrently, the relief line must be in operation prior to the opening of the Yonge North extension. So we keep passing related items to the Yonge extension, so I'm a little concerned that the Yonge extension is galloping ahead of the relief line. I was wondering what assurances are there that the TTC's actions are consistent with that of Toronto Council, and when will we see something about that in a report?
Through the chair, we're going to be reporting back next year on both Yonge Subway Extension and the relief line at the same time. What we're reporting back on will be the 15% to 30% design only. We're not reporting back on, we will be reporting back on the schedule at that time, a level 3 schedule, which will provide the opening of both of the lines so that you will see we're meeting council's directive to open the relief line before Yonge Subway Extension.
So I'm sorry, just I thought you said, I heard you say 50 and 30%. So next year you're going to be reporting on 50%. Oh, 15.
15 to 30%.
I thought 50. I was like, wow, we're that far ahead. Okay.
Good.
Yeah, that's my question.
Commissioner Byers?
I had the same question, so it's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? Does anyone want to move the recorded vote on item number 13, the Yonge Subway Extension station design? All those in favor? Byers, Lalonde, Cole, Heisey, Min Wong, De Laurentiis, De Bearmaker, opposed, Campbell, Fragedakis. We'll move, as we outlined at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to go to item number 21 now. And for everyone's information, that's the new streetcar program, resubmission of RFI results for 60 additional streetcars. Questions of staff? I mean, this has been before us before, so I know everyone's asked lots of questions, but I'm guessing there might be speaking or motions that change. Commissioner, so sorry, just before you start, no questions? Okay, questions starting with Byers.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to speak.
Oh.
Min Wong, then Byers.
So when we were dealing with this at the last commission meeting, there was some discussion about, and I think the chair has this concern, about certain vendors, the dependability and the reliability of whether they can deliver whatever they say they're going to deliver on time, and that hadn't been done yet. And notwithstanding the fact that we kind of thought we'd done that with Bombardier and missed the mark massively because we thought they could deliver on time and they didn't. I'm okay with the recommendation, but can we use that time to actually do that analysis now so that by the time we come back in January, we can say these vendors say they can deliver within a certain time period, and we actually think that they can deliver on time?
Yes.
Very good.
I think I heard yes.
Brevity is art.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Byers.
Yeah, so, and it's good that this comes on the heels of our dear friends in Bombardier, who were here yet again giving us more good news today. I have a question on storage. So with 60 new vehicles here, do we have enough capacity to store if and when we do proceed with these new vehicles, whoever supplies them?
To accommodate all 60, we need to undertake some modifications at Hillcrest. That's about $10 million of track work, which would add additional storage. With that additional storage, we can accommodate 60. Beyond that, we would need additional facility.
Okay, thank you. So this is the difficult cultural question for the organization. So I don't know whether, this has obviously been a very difficult experience getting our new streetcars, and the new ones are good, even though the 35,000 kilometers between failures hasn't been met. The vehicles are good, but probably the single biggest complaint I tend to hear is about the surface traffic, in particular with streetcars, given the rigidity of their tracks and the fact that they're less mobile on the street, et cetera, et cetera. With the opportunity or their consideration of new vehicles, is it worth, especially with this potential delay here, is it worth revisiting the question of whether we need streetcars on all the routes we have today? Or can we substitute buses, which are more flexible in the city and can get around construction periodically? Is it worth revisiting that question in line with additional equipment procurement?
Yes, we could look at that, and well, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this, but to add to that, I guess, we could look at that also in light of kind of new and emerging technology like electric buses, et cetera. So we could do that.
Thank you. So I support the delay. That's good. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from Commissioner Lalonde?
Just following up on Commissioner Byers' question, if we're doing that review, one of the things I've always been interested in is a comparison of the economics between streetcar and bus transportation. And I'm sure you guys have done that, but perhaps you could bring that as part of that report. And I'd be interested in the full life cycle comparison cost, capital cost, and then also operating cost to get a sense of how, because I assume that streetcars are cheaper or we wouldn't have them, but I'd like that as part of the report back. Thanks.
Only for nostalgia. Another question from Commissioner Campbell.
So this is to the CEO. We've removed the streetcars because of the shortfall in receiving the Bombardier cars. We've removed them from 2 routes, Dundas and Carleton. And can you speak? Do you have any observations as to changes in on-time, departure, on-time delivery, passenger loads, efficiency, and so on?
So
it's further to what Commissioner Lalonde.
Through you, Mr. Chair. When we made the decision to take the streetcars off those routes, it was to make sure that we could reallocate the vehicles that we had to provide good quality service on the routes we were providing. Right? We made a number of runners-directed trains, for instance, or streetcars, for instance, to always fill the gaps. That was the intention when we did that. We're looking now with the delivery schedule that Bombardier has, that I'll look at Kirsten, we potentially will go back on in September or October with, what route are we putting back in, if I could look? Putting one of those routes back at that period of time, knowing the number of vehicles that we'll have to run that system, that line.
So could
they answer the question?
Well, I mean, I wanted to know if we've seen improvements in transit service as a result.
Okay, so in that sense, what you've seen is the reliability go up in the last few weeks. Because if you recall, when we did the schedule last year for early this year, we had scheduled for significantly more vehicles and streetcars than we had available. And that's when in January, when we gave the CEO's report, I actually had introduced the fact that we were taking those two lines and putting buses on them because of the reliability of the oldest fleet. So the on-time performance, which you see in the CEO's report, was somewhat stagnant compared to last year. But all of a sudden, in the last 4 to 6 weeks, knowing that we now build schedules based on the number of streetcars we have, it's starting to go higher than it has in the last few years.
But
I'm
thinking specifically of the Dundas route and the Carleton route, where we've taken the streetcars off.
With the buses, you're saying?
We've taken the streetcars off. We've added buses. Is the transit experience better or worse for passengers?
It's a great question.
We hired you
I'm
for your
getting mixed
candor.
reviews, to be honest with you.
Did you hear what I said? We hired you for your candor.
I'm getting mixed reviews. A number of passengers have called me because they want the streetcar back. They don't like the inconsistency of the bus along the line. Okay. The buses can move in and out of vehicles and move quite faster along the line, which provides that bunching and gapping that we've had in the past. I'm sorry?
I think it's also important to note that one of the reasons that the buses are on those routes is due to construction.
Right.
So the construction impacts on the bunching and gapping can be significant, and we do have customer complaints with respect to issues around capacity and on-time performance. But I wouldn't say that that's because of the change in the mode. A lot of that is the construction impacts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so on the RFI for 60 additional streetcars item, just as a reminder, any other questions or people want to speak on the matter? Okay, so we'll have Commissioner Min and Wong move the staff recommendation. All those in favor? No one opposed, that carries. We are on item number 14. We have deputants. So we have Kingsley Kwok on the list. Dr. Anna Kramer has asked to be added, and Emily Daig has asked to be added. So is Kingsley here? Okay, so Commissioner Min Wong has moved to add Anna Kramer and Emily Daig on item number 14, which is improvements to transit along the Dufferin corridor. All those in favor? Well, Kingsley's on the list. Yeah, Dufferin bus. Anna Kramer and Emily Daig were not. Commissioner DeBerry moved a motion to add them to the list. All those in favor? Okay. I won't ask for who's opposed because I don't want to see the vote turn out there. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Kingsley Kwok. I'm a member of TTC Riders, a grassroots organization of transit riders that campaigns for better service and lower fares. The 29 Dufferin bus is one of the 5 busiest TTC routes with 43,000 riders per day. And TTC Riders has hundreds of members and supporters who ride this route. We support the improvement on Dufferin before the board. Some of our members have written to you in support of these recommendations as well. We urge you to implement full express service on Dufferin as soon as possible and high capacity service on Sundays. We support studying transit priority measures on Dufferin, including bus lanes, queue jump lanes, and signal priority. More service is needed, but transit priority measures are key to ensure that additional buses don't get stuck in traffic, like was commented upon the previous item. We are encouraged that these improvements are being proposed for the Dufferin bus, but we need better service across the city. TTC Riders has called for 10 minutes or better service on all routes across Toronto. We want to know when this board plans to fund and implement the full express bus network plan. I also want to address overcrowding and implementing the service improvements like express bus networks. recognize that this is part of the ridership growth strategy. So TTC riders want to ask, when will riders get to see the real ridership growth strategy? Today, an update is being presented about the initiatives in 2018-19 that have already been approved. When ridership growth strategy was endorsed on January 25th, it was referred to as a menu of options, and the board was told that more detailed proposals would come to the board for approval. This TTC riders is seeing as a piecemeal approach, and it means that a comprehensive ridership growth strategy has effectively been delayed for yet another year. The TTC has a ridership problem since 2014. We are still waiting for that ambitious, comprehensive plan and the funding to fix it. In conclusion, we encourage you to vote to improve Dufferin service on Dufferin as soon as possible by adding more service and studying bus lanes and transit priority. And we urge you to add more service and transit priority measures on all other routes across the city.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have a question for our presenter? No? Thank you very much. We'll move to questions of staff. Anyone? Oh, sorry. You had moved a motion for the two others. So Anna Kramer?
Hi, thanks for adding me at the last minute.
No problem. Just if you want to make sure your microphone's on, you have 5 minutes, and I'll start your time now.
Okay. My name is Anna Kramer. I'm an assistant professor of geography and planning at the University of Toronto, and I appreciate the chance to speak on the proposed improvements to the Dufferin bus. I just wanted to express my support, and I think that this is an example of the kind of incremental adaptive improvements that respond to bottom-up demand. And that showing some love for the humble bus network is one of the most effective things we can do to improve transit. And I'm basing this analysis, or this opinion, on an analysis that one of my students did, comparing a lot of all the proposed projects, transit improvement projects for the region, and using publicly available data. And she found that the express bus network that the TTC had proposed that was unfunded was by far one of the most efficient in terms of cost per rider and cost per new operating and capital cost per rider, and equitable projects in that it covers such a large area and serves such a diverse population, compared to so many of the projects that are already funded in the region. And I'm thinking of the kind of larger rail capital intensive projects. And so these kind of BRT light projects that with things like signal priority, all door boarding, select dedicated lanes where it makes sense, are following in the example of some other cities who have improved surface routes, like the New York City Select Bus Service, which led to improved travel times and reliability and increased ridership along these routes. So that's pretty much all I had to say.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this deputant? Thank you for coming. Thanks for your presentation. I don't think there are any questions. Emily Daig is next on the list.
So I have a little presentation here. Not to put the wrong end to this script. Well, I was going to show you my little thing I have on my phone, but it's at the other end of the table and blocked by a whole bunch of stuff, so I'm not going to. I don't know if any of you...
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have a point of order. If a deputant wants to show us something, I think she should have the ability to show us something, and I think our staff was on his way to help, so if it's possible, I don't mind making sure her time is reset so that she can get set up properly.
Thank you. I need to have it. I need to use my phone.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, guys. I don't know if you guys can see this. So this is all the buses currently on the 29 Dufferin. It's a really cool app. But what I was going to say is, you see how far it goes. It goes from basically the lake to Wilson Station. For many of us with disabilities, it is our connection to places that are inaccessible because of inaccessible subway stations. And the biggest problem with that is you've got Yorkdale Mall, which is made accessible by the Dufferin bus. You've got places along, you got Orphis Road, which wouldn't be accessible to us other than by bus. You've got the Glencairn area, you've got areas along there. But one of the things that I want to say is that the Dufferin bus is highly important. I use it on a daily basis. The bunching up happens a lot between Dufferin Station and Dufferin Mall. Sorry, I'm getting feedback on the microphone. Someone poke that one. Thank you. Yeah, that's better. So a lot of people use the Dufferin bus for accessibility to get places where the subway trains can't get you. I also use it to connect myself between my 514 streetcar, getting home on the 514 because I live on the other end, but also to connect when the C is running, connect to my 121 bus, which is now going to Ontario Place. It's also my home bus route. The Dufferin bus also connects a lot of us to accessible shopping, accessible places to go eat, and go visit our friends. So the 29 Dufferin bus needs better service. I quite often have to wait up to 20 minutes to be able to get on a bus at rush hour because they're loaded and people don't listen to the operators, and the operators are just fed up with screaming and yelling and getting abused for trying to do their job and trying to help us get a spot to sit. The Dufferin bus also has another problem. Drivers call it suffering on Dufferin because Dufferin bus is the most heavily used bus route that I know of. I love this route, but why isn't it that this route was offered an express bus years ago? We need Rocket up there to stop at major intersections and stop at major streets. And it would be great if the service was made more accessible by having it go up north of Wilson Station instead of having to connect to a Dufferin North bus, which rarely runs, so that we could get to Steeles Avenue. Those of us with disabilities also use the Dufferin bus to get to medical appointments, get to the CNE, get to TFC games. We use it a lot. And if you ask your operators, they have a lot of wheelchair users that actually use it. It uses the slinky buses, which are poorly designed in one aspect, and that is a chair that's a double seat, which should be a single, blocks 6 inches of our clearance to get in and out of the bus. And people that are sitting on that chair, we have a chance of hitting them, a really bad chance. I've done it, and I don't like it. But please, don't screw with the Dufferin bus. Just put an express out there. Make the service more reliable. If you had an express bus, it would be a lot more reliable. People won't walk 5 minutes between Dufferin Station and Dufferin Mall. It's a well-known fact. Ask any of your Dufferin operators, they'll tell you how lazy people are, truly. And that impacts it for the rest of us. So, in conclusion, the Dufferin bus is a vital part of Toronto society. It's a vital part of your transportation network, and it should have been given priority years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Emily? No, thank you. Questions of staff? Commissioner Lalonde.
Yeah, the numbers on this route are very high. My question is, at what point does it become potentially economic to consider alternative modes of transportation? Like, should we be thinking about streetcar for this kind of route, and how do we judge those kinds of economics?
Mark, can you answer the question? Dufferin's going to be part of a larger study with the City of Toronto where we'll be looking at the impacts of SmartTrack and RER, and it's going to be a larger area that we need to study in terms of how all of the routes are going to interconnect. And I think as a result of that study, we'll see whether or not Dufferin has, what the ridership can support in terms of a higher order transit. At this point, I don't think that's something we would be advocating, but I do think with the further study with the city, it's something we would have to bring back to the board to make those recommendations.
Did I see Commissioner Byers with a hand up or no? Anyone else? Questions? Speakers? Okay, I'm going to speak. I know I moved the motion. First of all, I think it's great news that an express bus is coming to Dufferin. The number's warranted, it's needed. We added 5 express routes in 2016. This is one of another 7 we're adding this year. So the express network, for those who are saying or suggesting it's not being funded, it is. It's good news. It's as we debate rapid transit lines and rail and all the different orders of rail, bus does deliver, and so it's good news. It may be news to some, but the Dufferin bus is even busy north of Bloor. It may even be news to some. The Dufferin bus runs north of Bloor. But part of the motivation behind me moving this, and actually Councillor Bailao seconding it at council, was, and Commissioner Lalonde asked a good question, well, what's next? And the reality is, as we debate transit in the city, there's nothing planned for Dufferin. Yet Yorkdale is going to be an entire little city unto itself. There are dozens of development applications from Eglinton to Wilson in my ward. The Galleria Mall is going to be a small city. We all know what's happening in the south end of Dufferin with Liberty Village and beyond. And so we keep approving tower after tower after tower. And all the time they say, well, it's right next to transit. Well, transit's just a Dufferin bus in traffic. And so I commend planning staff and transportation staff and certainly TTC for pushing forward a lot of these initiatives, but they're somewhat limited. Even with the express service, which I'm thrilled at, and I agree it should have been added a long time ago, you still worry that, as if the express route is stuck in traffic, as again, development after development after development gets approved, and the city planning staff at every turn say there's transit right there. Theoretically, there is, but we're getting to a tipping point where I don't know that there's going to be enough transit to accommodate the growth on that line. And at the north end, people will cite that it's close to the University subway line, but in some cases, it's over a kilometer walk. That's close for some, not for a lot of others. Certainly not for all the men and women who live at Villa Colombo and Columbus Center at Lawrence and Dufferin who couldn't get to Lawrence West Station. So this is a good news story, but I think it speaks to the broader issue. And my hope next term that this commission will start to be a more vocal proponent of speaking to that issue as development the city keeps growing, that there has to be a tighter link between approval of projects and plans and transit that's in the ground or being enhanced or improved. So with that, no. I kind of, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think recommendation 3 is a critical recommendation. It needs to be forwarded to planning and to transportation, as all of them do, as they keep approving all of these things. And I only wonder if TTC is ever circulated on these development applications that go around to the various divisions for comments about appropriateness in the various neighborhoods, about the density at these particular sites, as we continue to have our infrastructure crumble on itself and basically cause people to be stuck on bus after bus after bus, or wait for bus after bus after bus. So I think this is a good recommendation, as the other 2 are, but especially number 3.
So I think they're consulted. The question is whether planning staff takes that feedback into consideration when they recommend approval. But the TTC's voice, yeah, no, it happens. They need to listen to it. So all those in favor, recorded vote. Byers, Lalonde, Cole, Heisey, De Laurentiis, Fragadakis, DeBaremaker, Crisanti. Thank you very much. Item number 15, we have a deputant on this item. We have Alan Ewell. This is routing changes in the junction area. And we have Emily Daig, who's asked to be added to this item as well. So moved by Commissioner Fragadakis. All those in favor? So Alan Ewell's up first, though.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Chair, I didn't know there was a north of Bloor.
My suspicions confirmed.
Due to time constraints, I'm only going to talk about 2 routes on this report. The 2 routes are the 30 Lambton and the 40 Junction. I was actually at Dundas West Station during one of those information sessions. One of my suggestions that it would be helpful that when the report was brought before the board, it actually included ridership numbers for the segments of the routes that wanted to be adjusted. Regrettably, planning did not agree to that input, so here we are. I've been rambling at the TTC board for just over 7 years now. As a result, I've met a great number of TTC employees, all modes, most divisions. People I've talked to at Queensway all believe that this is a horrible plan. Queensway is a division that operates most of these routes, including the 30 and 40. It's my understanding the dislike for this plan runs through the entire chain of command at Queensway and that they expressed these views to the planning department. Regrettably, planning did not agree to that input, so here we are. Currently, the 30 Lambton route runs from High Park Station to Kipling Station. This report wants to make it from Dundas West Station to Kipling Station, 2 stations farther west. Route Planning 101 says if you have a long surface route that you have trouble maintaining service levels on, you don't make it longer. That's why the 501 is currently split during the day. According to this report, there would be improvement on the existing service level from High Park Station to Runnymede Loop, except 95% of those passengers boarding at High Park Station are still on the bus at the Runnymede Loop. The solution to Lambton service is to add another bus. I know that's money, but according to a report we looked at earlier, we currently have some. There would be a Lambton A, a B, and C route. The Lambton B would be the main line, and A and C would be shorter loops on each coming out of each terminus, covering the highest passenger volume and have the most room for passenger growth. I have detailed routing, but again, no time. This report says from 2011 to 2016, population change in the junction was minimal. While technically true, this fails to mention that there's a significant amount of gentrification in that corridor. What were money marts and other payday loan stores are now microbrews, pubs, restaurants, and other entertainment venues. While the resident population is stable, the migrant population has increased exponentially, more potential ridership growth. Like I said, this report unfortunately has no ridership numbers for the sections of the routes that it wants to change. So in the absence of TTC ridership numbers, I did my own. On average, from 7 p.m. to 11, the 30 Lambton bus leaves High Park Station at 50 to 70% of our off-peak crowding standard of 36 passengers. On average, Monday to Friday from 7 to 11 again, the 40 Junction bus leaves from 80% to 140% of our off-peak loading standard. Adding these 2 buses together at Dundas West Station means that a bus from 7 to 11, same time, would be loading at 130 to 210% of its off-peak loading passenger capacity. That's just off-peak service. Rush hours will even be more worse as the current Junction bus leaves Dundas West platform crush loaded at 51 passengers or more. Sorry I don't have time or the heart to go into the numerous other fuster-clucks that exist on the proposed route changes. If you approve any changes in this report, you'll have to make changes to our bus stops. Our bus stop signage to be specific. The version we currently have does not work very well at all. I say this without malice and as somebody with over 25 years experience in using signage and other nonverbal communication to influence customers' behavior. Our current blue night signage is an epic step backwards from what we had. We have gone from 2 reflective bars on the top and bottom of the bus stop to a non-reflective circle the size of a chocolate coin. While I like the moon on the blue night route numbering, the choice of lettering on the white background as compared to the lettering choice on our standard routes makes these routes harder to read from a distance. We use 2 different font types for express routes and now 2 different font types for standard red routes. While this is an honorable attempt at communicating more information to our customers, the net effect is just confusing our customers and making the route numbers harder to read. Mr. Chair, last month you were at the opening of the Mimico GO station. I challenge you to ride that route after this meeting and see how hard it is to tell the 176 route from a 66 route marker on the same pole. Do you see it now? And if that wasn't enough, we need to change our bus stop signage because our fabulous new current bus stop signage is not AODA compliant. But alas, that is a deputation for the next iteration of the TTC board. While some of you may or may not be here on December 12th of this year, it's pretty much a given that I will be. Thank you.
You won't be facing re-election challenges? Okay. Questions for Mr. Ewell from Vice Chair Heisey.
First, I'd like to compliment you on your restraint, having one deputation item in this meeting. That seemed very thoughtful, and I wanted to compliment you on it. So, having given you plaudits, I'm now going to ask you some questions. Queensway, do you mean the Queensway bus facility we operate, and you talked to DCC employees?
Yes, sir.
That's your take on the drivers you've talked to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then on the numbers issue, you dealt with capacity. You said, I did my own numbers.
Yeah.
So did you actually sit there and do a head count?
Yes, I did.
For how many hours?
From 7 to 11, 2 weeks in a row.
Every day?
3 days a week.
Okay. I'd like to speak to it.
Other questions for this deputant? No? Thanks for your presentation. We'll have questions of staff. Any questions of staff? This is on the junction item. Oh, sorry. That's what happens when you add your name late. You're not on the list.
35 minutes late. At least I tried this.
Okay, please come on up.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but with a website that's barely accessible, my screen reader has problems reading the PDFs. I'm sorry, but yeah, it takes me time to review the information. And yes, I was 35 minutes late asking, but at least I didn't do it at the day of the meeting. Thank you. So, let's get on to the 30 Lambton. I could bring out tons of props because I used to live on that route. I have many friends that still do. Many people with disabilities live on that route. And I wish you guys would listen to the operators on this route. There's an operator, I won't mention names because he asked me not to, that has been driving that route every 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, for 15 years. So, what I would like you to do is start listening to your operators that actually drive these routes. Listen to Queensway Bus Division operators because they know what it is out there. Especially around Maybell with the new condo building, it's going to be so crushed, the bus is going to have problems getting through. I love the idea of having the bus go from Kipling Station to Dundas West because it makes accessibility a no-brainer and makes things much better. And for those of you that are playing with your phones and not looking at me and not focusing on 30 Lambton numbers, I'm going to tell you something. I challenge you to come on out to 30 Lambton. Start at about 6:30, 5:30, 6:30. See how crush loaded the buses are. Come out there any time of the day and see how many people are trying to use that service at 30-minute frequency. It's very difficult. You're not going to get the numbers if you play with the service frequencies like you did before. I came here begging once for Lambton. I will do it again. I have friends that live on that route. It's an accessibility between Kipling and Dundas West because High Park is not accessible. Runnymede is not accessible. Islington is not accessible. And neither is the stations anywhere in between them. Jane is the only accessible station between Kipling and Dundas West. So if you truly want to have a service that works for the community, and you've got to understand that a lot of those people on Junction are gone by Runnymede, because I've been on there a lot. My mom used to live in a homeless shelter along there, and the only way I could go see her was to jump a junction from Dundas West Station. That route is used by a lot of people. Both routes are. High Park Station, people will get on. They'll get off 2 stops later, 1 stop later. And you know what? Let's increase accessibility. Just like you want to take the buses off 505, 506, which right now is making accessibility where there was none, and I'm one of the ones that's using 506 and 505 daily. Keep the Lambton accessible. There's a lot of people with disabilities on that route. Make it from Dundas West to Kipling. It makes far more sense, especially when there's a shutdown, and a person in a wheelchair is not going to be able to get on the shuttle buses. I don't even bother anymore. I try to find roundabout routes. So please, listen to the operators, listen to the people in the community, and let them tell you what they need, because the community is desperate. People in wheelchairs can't access the Islington no-frills because of Islington Station. So they take the Lambton to High Park Avenue, then jump a junction bus to Pacific, and then go to the no-frills. Because Runnymede, you can't get to the no-frills there. So this route is desperately needed to be changed. It's been needing it for 10 years at least. And please, when you think about doing it, make sure you put humans first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Emily? No, thank you. Questions of staff? Commissioner Byers to start.
So am I to understand that this is annual 2019 cost of $173,000, is that correct? Page 2 in the report?
That is yes, that's correct, but that's with respect to what is being recommended and being asked by the board, which is to approve the late evening and Sunday and holiday service on the 80 Queensway starting in September. So the other issues are still in public consultation, the other changes that are being proposed, and those will be brought forward for approval in a separate report.
I see. And these changes, I guess this appears to be very operational to me, and I question why it's something that the board should consider. I mean, looks like we're complying with service standards. Why don't we just let management do its job and adjust these routes periodically? I struggle with why this has to, frankly, come before the board. Just let management do its job. So that was my question, and as I wrote down on the notes, so for whatever it's worth, Mr. Chair. I don't know whether there's some threshold over which service adjustment matters need to be coming to this board, but I would set it fairly high. That's why you're here, to do that on our behalf, because you're way more informed than we'll ever be. It's more of a comment than a question.
Do you want a staff response, or? Yeah.
So the reason we brought the report back was merely as an update, so your comments are taken. There's no specific process or procedure that we're here for you today, other than the change in the extending the late evening service. But the rest of it is really just an update on a pretty significant piece of work that will affect the junction area.
Okay. Any other questions before the Vice Chair speaks? No. Vice Chair Heisey?
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion to refer Mr. Yule's presentation to staff for part of their ongoing study. I think it looks like he put a lot of work into it. I was impressed by his attempt. Even if it was not a professional count, he did a count. We shouldn't discount that. And the signage accessibility issue I thought was interesting. So I'd ask staff to have a look at it and tell us what they think.
Okay, so you've moved the staff recommendation and amended it to also refer the deputation by Alan Ewell to staff to consider as part of that further review. Okay, is that good? All those in favor of the amended motion? That carries. Okay, we're on to item number 18 that has 3 deputants with 1 late request. So on my list is Colby Badwar, Jihong Kim, Sheila Pizy Allen, and is Paul Codd here? Okay, and so a motion from Commissioner Fragadakis to add Mr. Codd as a 4th deputant on this item. All those in favor? That carries. Well, we'll start with Colby. Great, welcome. You have 5 minutes, and if you just want to make sure your microphone's on, I'll start your time.
All right, thank you to the members of the board. I'm here today to highlight just how far behind the TTC is on law enforcement presence on the system when compared with its peers. When staff and board members are discussing policy Frequently, we're comparing ourselves to our peers in North America. And if you look at the table, which I submitted as correspondence, so you should all have it, we are dead last, and not just dead last, but dead last by far. The column on the far right is the operative column. It's a little blurry on the screen there, but you can see TTC's at the very bottom out of these 12 different systems across North America. Andy Byford, who's now in New York, has 16 times more officers walking his beat, proportional with ridership, of course. Go Transit has 11 times as many. Of course, you know, you might say, oh, we have fare inspectors as well. This is just a comparison of sworn peace officers, so police officers or special constables here in Canada, officers who are empowered to be enforcing the criminal code and other offenses, not just checking fares. And of course, many of our peers also have fare inspectors, so I'm not comparing those. And of course, the board voted in December 2016 to disarm our fare inspectors of their batons and handcuffs, so they don't really have any public safety value anymore. They can't go out there and they can't effect an arrest. Not that that was ever their job, but we saw a recent incident, which was actually on the agenda today, where some fare inspectors were assaulted by a individual, and they had to basically just sit on them to effect an arrest. Also, the Toronto Police Services Board recently, well, not so recently, July 2016, voted to disband the Transit Patrol Unit, which was 78 officers strong. That's now gone, so that's even fewer officers that are on the system. So by first quarter of last year, roughly, there were 146 fewer officers on the system out there patrolling, equipped to, maintain public safety and make arrests if necessary. So if we, do some other comparisons, in Montreal, they have kept their Transit Patrol Unit with Montreal Police. They have 115 officers assigned to patrol STM Montreal Transit. So if you combine those officers with the STM's own complement, that gives them a ratio of 4,222 officers, or riders per officer, rather. So this is having a demonstrated impact on crime. If we look at some of the TTC's own stats, 2017 over 2016, assaults are up 15%. Assaults causing bodily harm are up 1,700%. There was 1 in 2016 and 18 in 2017. Assaults against peace officers are up 87.5%. Mischief of all types is up 49%. Possession of a weapon for dangerous purpose up 550%. So it's clear to me that the TTC desperately needs more officers. If they had 200, that still would barely improve the ratio. That would give them 7,300, which wouldn't even beat TransLink or STM's combined ratio. Just to get to the bottom of the middle of the pack at number 8, the TTC would need 400 special constables, and right now there are only 54 patrolling the system. So obviously the TTC isn't going to hire 350 new officers tomorrow. That's an unreasonable ask, but I think that the board needs to seriously consider making an amendment to the corporate plan to significantly expand the Transit Enforcement Unit, who are currently just a footnote in the cornerstone safety and security section of that plan. So thank you very much for hearing my presentation.
Thank you for providing it. You do have at least one question, starting with Vice Chair Heisey.
Mr. Badwar, who are you?
I am a political activist. I work for one of the security departments for a Class A property in the financial district as well.
Okay. And where did you get these statistics? Because I was quite intrigued by them.
So I'm just kind of pulling things off the internet. It was assembled a little bit short notice.
Okay.
And not every system is providing an annual number of how many officers they have walking on their beat, but basically, I'm pulling it wherever I can from news reports, and if they have it on their website, how many officers they have. So.
And I'm not suggesting you should have or did this work. Did you attempt to compare the relative incident rates on our system versus the other systems that have more officers?
I did not do that. If I had more time available, I could have done that. And if I had more time to depute, obviously that's a
next presentation,
deeper dive statistical analysis. So, but I just provided obviously a few of our own numbers, doing that level of how much crime there is on New York versus Toronto. Obviously, a much more involved process. So,
well, thank you very much for your work on our behalf.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your presentation. Next is Jihong Kim. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have a microphone in front of you, and there's a button below it. Yeah, and if you're on, I'll start your 5 minutes.
Okay.
Go
My
ahead.
story started its revelation at around 00:30 a.m. on June 17th this year. And it ended after about an hour. It involves the basics of treating a criminal on TTC, except there was no criminal. Instead, criminalizing an innocent person of the visible minority group was commenced. The night of otherwise a casual midnight city ride for many was tainted. The law enforcement personnel made the empty threats of calling the cops when they were the ones violating the bylaw, as well as violating the human rights by racially profiling me. They fabricated the crime scene out of the thin air to criminalize the innocent passenger, humiliated me in the public with that, tried to discourage the witness from volunteering to the crime scene, searched my belongings without the permission, failed to represent themselves in trustworthy manner, made sardonic remarks after deliberately unaccommodating my physical discomfort caused by the handcuffing on the fabricated allegation by saying the handcuffs are not tight enough, in quotes, and that it needs to be tighter, in quotes. Distorted, and they also distorted, made statements to criminalize the innocent passenger by infringing upon the pillar of the constitutional rights. Finally, they put a different time on the summons of defend ticket that they gave me. The vexing actions were done in deliberate attempt to undermine the passenger's basic human rights in gross corruption done in the power given to them in the name of the public transit system. All 4 TTC employees were suave and harmonious in the crime. Each one of them took part in reducing me to a meat on their own criminal gang activity. They descended the lawlessness that I had only seen in news about the drug cartels in Mexico or Colombia. What took place was against the Convention on TTC vehicles and contradicts Torontonians' common sense. I'm still scratching my head about why the law enforcement and fare inspectors acted in the way they did. If you let this go, you're only snowballing the time bomb. If you overlook the TTC law enforcement, you are only snowballing the time bomb. Along with your silence so far, the proud past of the ingenious creativity and originality that put the city's public transit system on the world map have turned sour among the people who have come from all over the world, your passengers. Understandably, nothing good can be said about Toronto's public transportation system at the moment. I have also traveled in public transportation systems of Montreal, Japan, South Korea, and Chile, and the message I want to communicate as an educated member as well as well-traveled citizen of this society is clear. The TTC employees and the qualifications of the job, perhaps, which gave them the job, are perhaps unfit for Toronto's public transit system. TTC has no business in irresponsible criminal conduct on their hands. The introduction of law enforcement as well as the fare inspector personnel was a big mistake.
Thank you. Does someone has a question for you? Vice Chair Heisey.
So, Mr. Kim, your presentation was about a personal experience that you have had.
Yes.
So have you reported a complaint through the appropriate channels that are available to you. I think you'd complain to the Toronto Police Services Board, but I'm not sure.
No, I have not.
Pardon me? So, and when do you allege this occurred?
June 17th.
Of this year?
Yes.
All right, well, I would urge you to make a formal complaint. That's not a question, but that's sort of my statement. And there is a process. We actually had a discussion about a process for how complaints would be handled when we got into this new area of enterprise. And I don't think that we can comment or help you in respect of your complaint, but we would have to let a process work its way through. Okay.
Other questions? Would you be amenable to providing a copy of your written submission that you just read?
I think it's a privileged document, and I will not.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our list is Sheila Pizy-Allen. Okay. If they could just kind of tell us who they are as they... Hi there. If you just don't mind telling us who you are, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak, and if you could just make sure your microphone's on so we can hear you, that would be great.
Hi, this is Ferry Partovi, and
I'm Pearl Mamba.
We're from James Finch Action Against Poverty, and actually someone else was supposed to be coming, our speaker, which Sabrina Butterfly Gopal, but she couldn't make it, so we're going to read the statement on her behalf. Violence and racism by TTC fair inspectors must be acknowledged by the TTC board, and immediate action must be taken. James Finch Action Against Poverty would like to remind the TTC board and all the city authorities, including the mayor and councillors, that the violent and racist actions of fair inspectors and police officers towards a black teenager on February 18, 2018 were gross professional misconduct and violation of his rights. We therefore oppose the following findings by Chief Executive Officer and Chief People Officer, and call on TTC Board to reconsider those findings. First one of those findings is the investigation found insufficient evidence to support that the respondents failed to treat the customer equally without discrimination with respect to services based on race, color, and/or ethnic origin under Section 21AI and of the TEU Code of Conduct. The second one, the investigation found that respondent one did not act in a manner that was uncivil toward the customer, amounting to discreditable conduct under same sections. The investigation found the force applied by respondent one to push and arrest the customer was reasonable, justified, consistent with the training provided, and did not constitute an assault under the Section 21A VI of the TEU Code of Conduct. And the fourth one, the investigation found the actions of respondent 2 and respondent 3 were consistent with TTC and community expectations, and not contrary to Section 21A XY of the TEU Code of Conduct. James Finch Action Against Poverty, which is the largest resident-based grassroots organization in James Finch area, believes that the above findings have been drafted to protect the TTC as opposed to address the systemic racism and injustice entrenched in actions of the above TTC employees. We therefore repeat our public call, which was made a few times and has been reflected in media, Toronto Star and others as well, including the following: an immediate suspension of all fare inspectors, which is very interesting because the TT saying that one of the respondents just left on his own, which means that he wasn't even suspended or no action was taken for different reasons. So an immediate suspension of all fare inspectors, and we also call on police, the same suspension for the police officers, same investigation of police officers who were involved in the conduct as well. That we think that violated the fundamental human rights of the young black boy who was a victim of the racist and cruel act. A public apology by the TTC, Police Services Mayor of Toronto. An end to racial profiling and targeting of racialized and poor communities by police, especially the young bodies, young racialized bodies. We just saw an example from the young brother. And many of young people in Jane Finch and other racialized communities, if they feel comfortable, they would come and talk about their experiences. So to put an end to racial profiling and targeting of racialized and poor communities by police and TTC enforcement officers, especially the fare inspectors, through immediate concrete actions, as well as policy changes through sufficient community input. Because some of these policies, they have to see when they talk about like community expectations, I mean, it got broadly condemned in social media, in our communities, in all racialized communities, broadly condemned these acts. So what kind of community expectation are we talking about here? Who came up with that, actually? It is unfortunate that this is not an isolated incident, but a chronic systemic oppression racism in this city. Young people of color should stop being the Toronto police and TTC fare inspectors' target of brutality and violence. Such behavior by city authorities is unjustifiable and not acceptable. We therefore support a fair compensation for young men as well, which we also think that part of the reason...
You're over 5 minutes now, so if you could just wrap up, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We also think that we are hoping that these findings are not influenced by the fact that this young man also been launching lawsuit against the TTC and others. You have to look at it from a justice perspective and also making sure that actions like this would never be repeated.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Just hold on to any questions of our deputants? No, thank you for coming. Next on our list is Paul Codd. Yeah, here he is. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to speak, and I'll start your time now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me today. My name is Paul Codd, and I'm a proud member of the TTC Riders. I live at 2 Secord Avenue in East York, Janet Davis's riding. I belong to the TTC's MetroPass program for more than 20 years. About 2 years ago, I had an incident on TTC property that I found quite startling. It occurred at the main subway station. I flashed my MetroPass at the ticket booth and continued upon my way, whereupon I walked past 3 police officers. I opened the door and went outside to catch the number 113 or 20 bus to the Kennedy subway station. Shortly thereafter, the door to the subway station flew open and out stepped the 3 police officers. I knew they were coming for me. One of the officers very brusquely asked me, "What is your name? Where do you live?" I replied, "Paul Codd, 2 Secord Avenue." The lead officer said, "There is a Paul Codd at this address," after pulling out a handheld device. What happened next was even more bizarre. He asked me how I got onto TTC property, and I told him that I used my MetroPass. Very impolitely, he said, "Let me see it." I told him that I would very slowly take it out of my track bag, which I did. I did it this way because he's one of Toronto's finest, and I didn't want to get shot. Remember Sammy Ateem and Alexander Loku? Then he asked me, where did you get the Metro Pass from? I told him that I'm part of the Metro discount plan. He again asked me where I got the Metro Pass from. And I told him that the TTC debits my account once a month and sends me the pass in the mail. He then said that I was being difficult. I replied, would you like me to lie? Then he figured out that I was lying. Why? Because my pass didn't have a dollar amount on it. He asked to see the Metro passes of two people also waiting for a bus. Both of theirs had dollar amounts. This led to a suspicion that I had a fraudulent pass. Why doesn't your Metro Pass have a dollar amount on it? He asked. Why don't you ask Andy Byford? I replied. Then he said to one of the other two officers, get this pass verified at the ticket booth. I told the officers that I was going to follow the officer with the Metro Pass and they could follow me. Later, I contacted a friend of mine, lawyer Peter Rosenthal. He decided to take my case. I was sent to two offices to fill out a report. I had to pay to file at each place. Peter told me that the TTC had the incident on tape, but it would cost me $667.50 to get that tape. I'm poor, therefore I couldn't afford the cost of justice. If the people needed tape, if the police needed tapes, would they have been charged for them by the TTC? Why would the TTC assist the perpetrator of a crime, the police, and abuse the victim of a crime, me? Detaining a citizen against their will is against the law, as is harassment. Why did the Better Way assist Toronto's finest in breaking the law? Thank goodness the TTC is hiring more security officers to harass more citizens. And something else that happened.
You're just over 5, so if you could wrap up, please.
It'll take a second. Thank you. I was at the Scarborough subway station when someone holding what looked like a flagpole waved to someone at the end of the track. Within about 2 minutes, this person walked towards me and he said, "Do you have a weapon on you?" Now, what I'd like to know is, assuming I did have a weapon on me, would I be stupid enough to tell him so? Is this the type of people you find folks hire? Are you mad? Could you please get sensible quickly before someone does get killed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Or Mr. Codd? No, no questions. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your presentation.
Have a great day.
You too. Item number 18, are there questions of staff on this item? This is the annual report that goes to Toronto Police Services. She wasn't on. You were? Okay. I didn't have that on my list. Any questions? You want to move it, Vince? Okay. The staff recommendations are moved by Commissioner Crisanti. All those in favor? That carries. Item number 20. It's the Ridership Growth Strategy Status Update for information held by, I think, Commissioner. I saw De Laurentiis' hand go up first, so we'll let her ask questions.
I just have a couple of questions. Would we have geographic breakouts of ridership in our database? Do we have such data? So by region, by neighborhood, by...
We have ridership by route.
And stop level data as well.
Go ahead, Mark.
Route level, stop level data, we can narrow it down to the traffic zone ward, old cities within the city of Toronto.
Okay, good. So it just occurs to me as I look at our data and our reports and considering some of the items that were on the agenda today, the Dufferin bus, et cetera, that in the, for us to really understand the ridership challenge, and we're going to consider, I think, some motions around the broader mobility, that it may be really helpful to see ridership data segmented, and then I think that would inform some of the other discussions we're having around targeted mobility issues or whatever. So it's really, so it's a question of whether we could do that, and thank you, that's great that the answer is there. And I think it would be really helpful if we could segment it and really understand it better. The other thing, the other data question I had here was that we do know on page 3, we do know what the irritations are, what the issues are, why people leave, or what they complain about. What I've never seen is specific data and research done on and questions of individuals who've actually left to see whether, what were the reasons why they left. Are people using Uber? What does that data actually look like? And so is that do we have any insight in that respect?
So in our original report back on the ridership growth strategy, we did provide information from an exit survey in terms of customers who have decided to not use the system. And it's for a variety of reasons, but I think that actually what we find that the drivers for customer satisfaction correlate to why people are not using the system as well. Affordability, reliability, crowding, all of the very similar issues.
And I guess the other piece of that data would be, so what are they doing? What actually, because people aren't staying at home, they're still traveling. So what is the preferred, when people leave the TTC, what is it exactly that they're doing? I think it would be really useful for us to understand what it is what mode of transportation they're using, because I think it would also help us then to inform the discussion we would have around what sort of broader mobility strategy should we be looking at?
I mean, the data that the exit survey that we did indicates that people generally move to a car. Ride sharing and things like Uber and Lyft are gaining in popularity and proportion, which I think is intuitive to what you see around you. But generally, I think we are still in a competition with the car.
Other questions? Commissioner Fragadakis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I was wondering if someone could elaborate on what improvements are in the works for Line 2 other than the ATC, which is coming.
So as of now, when we look at our crowding standards and the demand on Line 2, we are within our standards. So service improvements from a service level increase are not on the horizon. What we do have are in ongoing discussions is looking at the service reliability on Line 2. Our discussions about perhaps deploying RAD trains or extra trains on Line 2 in the future, whether or not we can pilot that to begin with to see whether there's merit to that or not. Also, we're constantly reviewing running time to ensure that we're providing a schedule that's achievable and therefore customers are experiencing a on-time service.
In addition to that, we have some other operational improvements which are coming for September and October. We know that we've been having some issues around accommodating the on-time departures and running of trains from our yards. So we have changed our strategies for September and October. So that should be improving the frequency of trains that we're getting through places like Eglinton and Bloor.
Great. On page 8, it mentions upgrading 300 stops and installing 400 shelters. Is there a database or a list that details all that? And if so, is it on a website?
It's not on the website, but we do have a database, and we could provide that data.
Great, because I've been having a situation on O'Connor near Coxwell where it's taken over like a month and a half to ascertain whether there is a shelter going in or not. So I'll be chatting with you later about that.
Sure, we will provide the data.
Thank you very much, because I've been getting conflicting stories. So on page 9, it mentions the discounted TTC Go Fare. So I was just wondering, is there still a GTA pass?
There is currently a GTA pass, but it is intended to be phased out in conjunction with the other GTA properties.
So it's not going to be available on Presto or in some...
That's correct.
Okay. On page 11, it mentions working with bike share. However, most of the bike share stations citing problems that seem to emanate from the TTC, from what I understand from bike share, otherwise known as Toronto Parking Authority. So I'm not sure if we're being as helpful and cooperative as we could be on this issue. I waited to get some more information on that, but are we tracking, for example, any denials or delays of bike share requests stations on TTC property as part of my verification of whether what I've been told is true or not?
I think we work very closely with Bike Share. We have a memorandum of understanding with Bike Share in terms of how we're going to work together. I think there is room for improvement. I think we have had issues that we've had to work with local councils, for example, to resolve. But I think that, yes, I take your point. There's always room for improvement, but we strongly support Bike Share. We strongly want more bikes at our stations. That first mile, last mile. We see bikes as key. So we're not trying to get in their way, and we really want to enable it.
Oh no, I'm just trying to find out what's really going on. So I'm going to continue my conversation with you guys. Yes, then we wouldn't need to keep track, or we still might need to keep track. But I'll continue my conversation with Susan offline about some situations that are unfolding. Thank you.
3 people did motions on it.
Other questions? Okay. On the item, actually, just before we I'll move the staff recommendation, but I'll just use this moment and bear with me. I just want to highlight, as we talk about ridership growth, a few things we've done. Implementation of the 10-minute network a couple years ago, that improved 42 routes. Expansion of the all-day, everyday network, that improved 47 routes. Improvements to the overnight network, that improved 21 routes. Reducing off-peak crowding standards, that improved another 34 routes. Obviously, the early Sunday morning subway opening, that helped the subway lines. The new express routes in 2016, there were 5 routes there. We enhanced the community bus on 2 routes. The relief of peak crowding in 2018 measures, that enhanced and improved 20 more routes. In 2018, again, we moved to relieve off-peak crowding. That improved 14 routes, and we're introducing another 7 express routes this year. So I think the proof is in the pudding, and certainly our actions speak louder than any words. And this board has enhanced service at levels we've probably never seen before. So with that, I'll move a receipt of information for the ridership growth strategy. All in favor? That carries. Item number 23 is a notice of motion from Vice Chair Heisey, I believe seconded by Commissioner De Laurentiis. And this is to, I think, get a seat at the table at Metrolinx. I'll let you speak to it. How about that?
So when I first got on this board 5 or 6 years ago, it struck me that the TTC and Metrolinx boards should talk to each other. And for 2 years, I tried to convince my colleagues on this board that why don't we ask Metrolinx to talk? And I didn't get much take-up. And we had a new board come on, and I suggested it, and to my delight, my colleagues said, yeah, that's a good idea. We asked Metrolinx. After a little while, we did get a board meeting, I think in 2016, and it was quite successful. I thought it went very well, and I think Josh and I were quite encouraged by the tenor of the meeting. It was very collegial. It was at Go Transit headquarters, and Josh and I thought, well, let's reciprocate the dinner invitation and invite Metrolinx to our place. And we did, and we didn't hear anything. We invited them again. They said, oh, we can't have a meeting because we don't have a CEO. This was after a year and a half. And fine, they've got a new CEO. They've had one now for how many months?
We can speak about it in years now.
Yeah, it's some significant period of time. And it's apparent to me that Metrolinx doesn't want to have board meetings with the TTC board. And I think we need to have board meetings together once in a while, maybe twice a year. But this is an attempt to institutionalize what I think is essential for the GTAA and the City of Toronto, which is that the two major governance authorities for public transit have a formalized interaction at the board level. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's the only thing I can come up with, but maybe this resolution will lead to another decision that will enable that kind of conversation. But I think it's a propitious time to make the request with a new government at Queen's Park and with an impending municipal election. So as part of the board, the outgoing board, I thought it was time to repeat the request to the new government and see if it has any traction. So I think everybody else knows the issue.
There you go. Well said. Commissioner De Laurentiis.
I just want to add that I'm supporting I seconded the motion because for two reasons. One, it is quite normal in corporate relationship where the significant customer, which we are, Metrolinx or Presto, would be part of could be part of a board, and vice versa, since we're such an important customer. They should be part of our board. The second good reason is that as we talk more about integrating the mobility solutions, it just makes for a more informed discussion when both sides are participating in their governance, in each other's governance structures. And I think there's a better flow of information at the management level. It's a good message to the management team that we want to work in a collaborative fashion.
Thank you. Commissioner Byers?
So just a comment. I, from a governance point of view, I don't love it because having stakeholder representatives is not great, but I'm going to support the motion partly to be remembered fondly by my commissioner colleagues, but also having some dialogue is better than no dialogue. And I think that's the goal here, and having a better communication between the organizations is absolutely essential, so I'll be supporting this.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the perfect solution. I thought the board meeting was really helpful, but I almost felt like we're all kind of, on our best behavior, like at a dinner party where you're kind of all, I don't know how real it was and substantive. Now, I don't know if they ever have those conversations at Metrolinx because we don't see any of that. Where we have it all out in the open, but I think it sends the right message that we have to formalize some way of better working together and communicating than we have in place now. So I'll support it too. So with that, all in favor of the Vice Chair's motion, that carries. So on items number 24, 25, and 26, 24 is Heisey's on focused on bike share and ferries.
And it's been revised.
And it's been slightly revised. The motion I put forward is on the broader integrated mobility, a model I'm suggesting we take a look at or start to report on. 26 from Fragadakis looks at bike share. Why don't we deal with them together as one item? Because I think the questions and speeches will be somewhat similar. Movers of motions can focus on what they've put forward, and then we'll just vote on them quickly individually. So with that, questions of staff or movers of the motions? You can have those. Okay, so
maybe I'll ask one
yeah.
of staff, and that is there anything about any of these motions that makes you uncomfortable, Rick?
Better have a look. Lots. You just got the job. You should read it.
Like, as I understand it, we're asking for, or the motions are asking for review and consideration and analysis. But, you know, when you look at the list, is there anything there that you'd say, well, like, let's not even think about it? They're all worthy of at least looking at.
I would say, you know, having taken a look at this, yeah, it's definitely worthy of review and having the discussion. There's no doubt.
And I guess my follow-up is, can you put together the necessary resources to do the work required of the TTC in doing that analysis?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what's asking the city to do.
Yeah. Well, but I assume, I know we're asking the city, but I think the TTC being part of it too.
The heavy lifting. Yeah. Yeah, just so before people speak to it, any questions of movers or staff? So Vice Chair Heisey?
So I said to Josh about just after the provincial election, is there anything we should do at our last meeting to tell the new government what our thoughts might be as a group of people who've been on the board a while, who've thought about the issues, debated them. And he said that's not a bad idea, and it surprised me because myself, had exactly the same thought process. He took it further than I did. And it turns out that Mary was thinking along the same lines as well, all independently of one another, that we needed to look at more modes of transport than we're doing currently. Because the fact that we've talked about bike share through Mary's motion, mine's about the bike share and the ferries, Metrolinx, TTC coordination, and then Josh does the bigger picture, which I'm strongly supportive of, which is the Transport for London model, because I've seen it work in London. I've seen how bike share is integrated to transit. It's all part of the same deal. And it just seems to me that I don't know how it will get done, but I think our region needs to do it. So wherever this ends up, and maybe it won't end up anywhere, it'll be another position paper like the Greater Toronto Authority many years ago with Mr. Chong, but maybe something might happen. So let's hope that something positive can come out of this, that the new government will look at it and give it some consideration.
To speak, Commissioner Byers.
Yeah, so I think these are sensible things to review. Again, is it the right answer? Who knows? But reflecting back a little bit on the last 12 months, I think one of the most interesting things that this organization, the city, have done is the King Street pilot project. Is that the right answer? Who knows? But probably the most effective integrated thinking in a project in the area in a long, long time, if not ever. And I think these motions also encourage joint thinking about common problems. So I think it's the right thing to have some thought on and report back to the new board.
Thank you. Commissioner Fragedakis.
Obviously, I'm going to be supporting all of the motions, and I also just want to comment on how we all seem to be of a like mind. I know I've just come onto this board for the last 2 years, or a year and a half, and I can say that this has probably been one of the best boards I've been on. While I've been here at City Hall, we have like some really great public appointees to our board who actually bring real life experience and lots of other expertise to the table, and we have our colleagues from different parts of the city, and we all end up almost on the same page on just about everything on this agenda, with maybe like 5 to 7% that we don't agree on, but it's all very respectful, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations about how do we move more people more quickly in this city, not just by subway or by bus, but by other modes as well, including the ferry system and bikes, and including walking.
Thank you. Commissioner De Laurentiis and then Lalonde.
I was delighted to see these motions, and will support them, and because really it forces and it requires us to think through the customer perspective. It puts us in the position where we have to ask the question and all the questions around how is the rider? How is the individual who's trying to get around this city? What are they looking for? What are the options that are open to them? How can they be integrated? How can they be made smoother? So I think it's a brilliant last set of motions, and I'm delighted to see them.
Commissioner Lalonde.
So I will not seek to amend these motions, but I would suggest to the next board that they may, in the same spirit of these motions, we may want to consider some kind of changes to the governance model around transit in the GTHA. Because as much as these things might affect the the customers within the city limits of Toronto, we also know that we have many issues dealing with integration of transit services across our boundaries as well. And perhaps there's a better mousetrap out there for that as well that we haven't thought about yet.
Thank you. Commissioner DeBearmaker. I don't know where you popped out of there, but go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll certainly support the motions, and I think it will be a healthy exercise for our staff and city staff and everybody else staff to get together and look at these things from perhaps a more integrated approach. I did react pretty strongly when I saw licensing of taxis. And I can tell you, Councillor Wong and Councillor Moscow, some 20 years ago, did some taxi reform. And it's been a cat fight ever since, and it probably was a cat fight before they got involved. At this commission, we don't even see the tip of the iceberg of the license of the taxi industry. In itself, it is an over a $1 billion a year industry. So it would rival our bus routes in terms of volume, but in terms of intrigue and spy versus spy and jealousy and people stabbing people who are stabbing other people. It is a crazy, crazy file. You throw Uber onto that, and it's a lot of turmoil. So I'm not sure what our professional staff will say to this, but I think the merit in this is to start saying to people at the license, because again, taxis falls under the licensing committee, not the planning committee, not the Toronto Transit Commission, not the transportation department, but the licensing committee, and it probably just landed up there because that's the way they did it 50 years ago. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens here. And again, I do think merging all these modes of transportation together is the right direction to go. So our staff may come back and say, well, bike share, while we want to be have a relationship with bike share, we don't want to take it over because the parking authority will say, good luck to you, and here's the annual cost, and see how you do. But there may be some really creative ways for all of these different components of our transportation system to come together. But we just finished in the license committee licensing ice cream trucks and food trucks. And Councillor Cole can tell you, even you think ice cream, hot dogs, how could there be any controversy over that? And yet it becomes very controversial. Same with food trucks. What could be wrong with a simple food truck serving a few samosas out on a public road somewhere? Well, it is crazy. So we will have to see whether our staff in the end want to take this on, or if they want to just connect in some ways to say maybe some of those things will stay where they are now, but we will actually start to attend some of their meetings to give them input, and we will have them on a committee where they're coming over to us to give input as well. So I really like the ideas, and I think it is very healthy for whoever is here come December/January to sit down and give some thought to what is the future direction, because I think that's the role of this board. I think there's a comment earlier about operational bus routes. We may not, be the commission's role may not be in deciding what bus route goes where, what bus stop should be added or subtracted, but maybe these more philosophical directions on how we move people around is a very positive thing. So I'm happy to support them as well.
Thank you. Other speakers? You sure? I may speak now. I'll speak to it, and I think I can speak to all the motions because they do kind of dovetail nicely together, but I guess mine and more generally, you know, I think it couldn't be any more telling than the fact that we have to move motions at this commission to ask for bike share at our stations, or battles between the parking authority and us on commercial agreements, but we're managing lots, takes years and goes back and forth and back and forth. You know, and then you think even beyond that, you know, we see, do they park pricing to drive transit users, or is there any correlation or coordination of policy at all? Similarly, you know, anything with, you know, Commissioner DeMaremaker mentioned the licensing of rideshare, right? The world's changed. We have ride sharing, whether we like it or not, but it falls to the same people, competent, smart people, but they also, their mandate is licensing food trucks and hot dog carts, and just because there's a business license. And so whether we like it or not, the people we're trying to serve see the world this way, and they're going to demand that we provide the services that way. And I kind of joke that I think most people on their phones, their world is more integrated with their apps than the providers who are the operators and providing the service. And while I would like a more regionally integrated system with all these things, I'm kind of tired of just petitioning a provincial government and asking and waiting. All these things we can actually do. They all fall under our umbrella. They're all city agencies, city departments, city purview. And so what the eventual entity looks like, I don't really care, but there just has to be a more integrated way of managing this full suite of mobility options and services out there for the people who use them. I think those people expect that we are doing that already, and that whether we want to lead on it or follow, it's happening. And so this world is coming. Let's get ahead of it. Let's move people more efficiently around the city. Let's maybe even realize some operational and organizational efficiencies by doing that. I'm not sure why we need a parking authority back of house system and a TTC back of house system, and let's get that integration so where it should be, so that we provide the service for those people we all commonly serve. So with that, I hope it generates a good discussion, and I hope it we can look at ways of becoming a more modern organization, and we can all collectively serve our residents more meaningfully and effectively. So with that, we're going to vote on 3 motions. Motion number 24 is Commissioner Heisey's, which focuses largely on asking to look at the ferries and bike share. All those in favor? That carries. Number 25, I believe, is my motion that I just spoke to about reviewing kind of a transport for Toronto model. All those in favor? That carries. Item 26 is Commissioner Fragadakis's asked to reporting back on bike share locations. All those in favor? That carries. Just before, don't leave. The one thing I want to mention before we start to wrap up. So Kevin and Chrisanne, and I guess Don before then, and I'm sure the people support them, do an amazing job running these meetings. And just to give you a bit of context, we have had at least, by our quick count, 88 formal meetings this term between committees and the board that they have run all of them. We have voted on or passed over 700 board reports. And that goes to obviously our clerk's team here. I think we should give them a huge round of applause for the work they do. While Alan Yule joked about his re-election prospects and whether he'd be back or not, I don't know if I'll be back, and certainly I don't know if I'll be back here, but I'll say it's been an honor to serve in this role. I actually think we've accomplished a great deal. I think we have a lot to be proud of, and I think transit in Toronto is much better today than we all started. So with that, I will move adjournment. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I'd like to, before you do that, I'd like to move a vote of thanks to you as our chair. You make it look really easy, but it's not. Having chaired many meetings, it can be very frustrating. So I'd like the minutes to show a vote of thanks to Chairman Cole.
It's a love-in session, so I'll just finish it off. I've been on boards for 20 years in the City of Toronto, and Josh has done the best job as chair of any of the boards that I've been on, other than ones I chaired myself. But the final closer is a compliment to my colleagues, which is this is the best board I have ever sat on, bar none. and I have been on many differently composed boards, and that's a real compliment to all of you. I feel very fortunate to have worked with you.
Could I just?
So with that, thank you to. Oh, go ahead.
Well, and I'm not running for anything, at least not yet. But I know this is my last meeting, and I just wanted to thank all board colleagues, fellow commissioners for a great involvement in the last 3 years. Thank the management team for fantastic support of the board and the great work you do. I'd like to thank members of the public who are here, week in and week out, month in and week out, and month out, for your support as well, and it's important work. So I've enjoyed it immensely, tried to add a little value, and we'll look forward. Maybe I'll make a presentation at some future meeting, but thank you all very much.
Yeah, so again, thank you to board members, thank you to the staff who I know work so hard, thank you to the thousands of men and women who make the system run, and of course to the public and our customers who we serve. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll ask for a recorded vote, and I will move adjournment. All in favor? Crisanti, DeBaremaker, Fragadakis, De Laurentiis, Heisey, Byers, Lalonde, Cole. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned. Wow. Yeah.
So these are the 44 I like doing it. It's in the good scenario. I've been around for multiple before. I just can't handle these on we're at the
Good luck in October.
Oh, yeah. We'll chat. I'm sure we will. Thank you for your job. It's been good.
That's right. I just want to say thank you for your help. Just feel really happy items from October. Good luck. That's really good. You do that.
Josh, good luck to you. All right, good luck. See you back here, okay? Yeah. Hey, don't screw up.
You go there.
Yeah, knock on doors. Congratulations.
I just, because it's not on my list, right? So I.